Chapter 805. In the air. Master Daoyuan's body was tightly gripped by the war dragon's claw. He couldn't even struggle a little. Under the immense pressure, Master Daoyuan's body shattered bit by bit as he screamed in agony. Master Daoyuan. In the End Empire, he was considered a famous expert. But now, he had fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands like an ant. Chu Fengmian could easily defeat him and even toy with him. How is this possible? Kid, you dare to kill me? I'm from the End Dynasty. If you kill me, the End Dynasty won't let you go. Master Daoyuan roared loudly. However, Chu Fengmian's face was calm. He didn't even take Master Daoyuan's words seriously as he continued to speak. Sui, I'll leave Master Daoyuan's life to you. As for the rest of the Wang family, it's time for them to perish. With a wave of Chu Fengmian's hand, Master Daoyuan's spiritual energy was completely sealed. Then, Chu Fengmian threw him in front of Suhi and made him kneel before her. Let me go. As long as you let me go, I'm willing to serve you for the rest of my life. Master Daoyuan looked at Suhi, who was holding the ancestral dragon supreme sword, and loudly begged for mercy. He no longer had the dignity of a life and death realm expert. In order to survive, he didn't hesitate to beg for mercy from Suhi. He could already see that Chu Fengmian was here to avenge his family Su. Only by begging Suhi could he have a chance to live. Master Daoyuan's aptitude wasn't high. Because of this, he had to go through untold hardships to survive the life and death tribulation. Now that he had cultivated to this level, he didn't want to die. However, Sui's expression didn't change. It was incomparably cold. The sword in her hand flashed, and Master Daoyuan's head was directly chopped off. The Wang family head fell just like that. Good. Seeing Sui's action, Chu Fengmian laughed loudly. This Suhi was indeed a member of the family Su. He killed decisively. Regardless of whether one wanted to become a martial artist, an alchemy master, or a weapon refining grandmaster, one needed to have a resolute and perseverance. Since that's the case, I'll take care of the rest. Chu Fengmian gathered the spiritual energy in his body. Suddenly, it gradually condensed in the air and turned into a huge spiritual sword that was at least 10,000 meters long. Boom! At the moment when the power of this huge spiritual sword was condensed to the extreme, the entire palace and courtyard of the Wang family was suddenly swept away by a ray of sword energy. None of the Wang family's disciples were able to leave this place alive. They had all died under Chu Fengmian's sword. There aren't many treasures in the Wang family after all. However, the more wealth there is, the better. Take it all out. Chu Fengmian stood in the air above the ruins of the Wang clan. His gaze swept across the area, and he immediately saw a treasury hidden under the ruins. The treasury was covered with restrictions. It seemed that only important figures of the Wang family would be able to open it. However, for Chu Fengmian, these small restrictions were nothing. He had easily destroyed the Wang family, let alone these restrictions. Chu Fengmian waved his hand. The moment a ray of spiritual energy blasted down, the restrictions on the treasury were all shattered in an instant. It opened immediately. Chu Fengmian saw the mountainous pile of spirit stones with a single glance. Collect them all. Chu Fengmian didn't waste any time. He immediately gathered a ray of spiritual energy and collected all the spiritual stones in the treasury into his spatial ring. Even a mosquito's meat was meat. After all, this treasury was the accumulation of the Wang family for countless years. Although it was definitely not as good as the treasures that Chu Fengmian had obtained from the ruins of End, it was still a decent harvest. After collecting all the wealth, Chu Fengmian left. The only thing left of the Wang family was the ruins and the ground full of blood sacrifices. From today onwards, the Wang family was no more. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian turned into a ray of light and left with Suhi. In a mountain range a few hundred miles away from the Azure River border city, Chu Fengmian suddenly slashed down with his sword and split the mountain range into two. From the center of the mountain range, a cave was directly opened. In this mountain range, there was an extremely special spiritual spring. Chu Fengmian needed some time to completely master the Nine Realms sword technique. When Chu Fengmian attacked to destroy the Wang family, he felt that his Nine Realms sword technique was created by taking the essence of all the sword techniques in the world. It could be said that the countless sword techniques had their own merits and were extremely messy. Chu Fengmian had to simplify the complicated. If he was too careless, it was very likely that he would go berserk on the spot. At that time, he would lose all his spiritual energy. At worst, he would die on the spot. Chu Fengmian did not want to end up like that, so he hurriedly found a cave to comprehend the Nine Realms sword technique and understand its true essence. These materials are all excellent refining materials. During this period of time, use these materials to refine weapons. Without my permission, do not disturb me. Chu Fengmian took out a lot of materials from the empty ring and directly threw them all to Suhi. Yes. Suhi respectfully sat outside, picked up the refining materials, and began to refine. Now that Chu Fengmian had avenged the death of the Su family for her, Suhi was now extremely respectful to Chu Fengmian. He treated any word of Chu Fengmian as a supreme order and obeyed it. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian sat in the depths of the cave and set up countless restrictions. Only then did he wholeheartedly immerse himself in comprehending the Nine Realms sword technique. Waves of swordsmanship gradually spread out from Chu Fengmian's body and constantly appeared in front of him. There were tens of thousands of sword techniques. There were sword techniques from the ancient era, and there were sword techniques from the current era. There were also sword techniques of unknown origin. These sword techniques each had their own strengths and weaknesses. They restrained each other and were incompatible like fire and water. However, among the countless sword techniques, there was only one that was the most dazzling. It seemed to be a sword technique created by gathering the strengths of tens of thousands of sword techniques. Nine Realms sword technique. Encompassing the Nine Realms. The World Sword Technique. The unique and righteous. Chu Fengmian closed his eyes, and the sword essence on his body became sharper. In Chu Fengmian's mind, the image of an ancient book suddenly condensed. Every page in this ancient book recorded a different sword technique. There were tens of thousands of ancient books, and there were only 2 words on this ancient book: Nine Realms. Chapter 806. This ancient book was the condensation of countless swordsmanship in Chu Fengmian's mind. Every page of this ancient book recorded the exquisite swordsmanship of ancient times. If this ancient book was taken out, it would definitely be a treasure that countless experts in the 9 regions would fight for. Even the 7 major sects would fight for it. However, this ancient book gradually became thinner and thinner in Chu Fengmian's mind. Only the essence of the countless swordsmanship recorded in it was left. The rest of the impurities were directly refined by Chu Fengmian. Under the sweep of Chu Fengmian's consciousness, this swordsmanship was constantly condensed and gradually turned into a single sword technique. This swordsmanship was reborn from this ancient book and was much more powerful than any of the previous swordsmanship recorded in the ancient book. Chu Fengmian closed his eyes and rested. Time passed day by day. Every minute and every second, Chu Fengmian was refining the 9 regions' swordsmanship and constantly condensing it. Although the ancient book in Chu Fengmian's mind was constantly shrinking, the exquisiteness of the swordsmanship had reached a completely different level. I didn't expect that it would take me a week to completely comprehend this swordsmanship. In the cave, Chu Fengmian slowly opened his eyes. It had been a week since he started cultivating. During this week, Chu Fengmian finally condensed the 9 regions' swordsmanship completely. It was extremely risky for him to create his own swordsmanship. It could be said that one wrong step would lead to a tragic end. Fortunately, Chu Fengmian discovered that something was wrong in advance. Now, he had properly removed the impurities of the swordsmanship and integrated the countless swordsmanship into one. Otherwise, many of these swordsmanship strengths would restrain each other. A mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers. In Chu Fengmian's body, it was very likely that the power of countless swordsmanship would explode at the same time. It could be said that it was extremely dangerous. Fortunately, Chu Fengmian was able to deal with it calmly and eliminate these dangers. However, this also reminded Chu Fengmian that if he wanted to condense the 9 regions swordsmanship, he had to be careful at every step. Boom! Just as Chu Fengmian gradually calmed down the sword essence in his body, a wave of spiritual energy suddenly came from outside. Oh? Sui had actually succeeded in cultivating it. I wonder what kind of spirit artifacts she has forged are like. The refining technique that Chu Fengmian gave Sui was, in fact, the assessment technique used by the Heavenly Soldier family Su to assess the aptitude of the family Su's disciples. Using this artifact forging technique, the first spirit artifact that was forged represented their artifact forging aptitude. To be able to refine a yellow-grade spirit tool, one could be considered to have some aptitude for refining tools among the family Su's disciples and could be nurtured. If one was able to refine a black-grade spirit tool, one could be considered a genius in refining tools and was worthy of being nurtured by the family Su. As for the earth grade and heaven grade, they were rare geniuses in the family Su for thousands of years. They might even inherit the position of the family Su's head. Now, this Sui was actually able to refine it. At the very least, this proved that her aptitude wasn't bad. Let's go take a look. Chu Fengmian got up and destroyed the countless restrictions in the cave. He was not in a hurry as he slowly walked out and saw Sui at a glance. Sui's forehead was covered with bean-sized beads of sweat and her face was full of fatigue. This time, refining tools took 7 days. For Chu Fengmian, refining tools for 7 days without rest was nothing. However, Sui was only in the body refining realm. In these 7 days, she had used up all of her strength. Take it. Chu Fengmian came out and saw Sui's appearance. His mind moved as he took out a few elixirs from his spatial ring and gave them to Sui. Yes. Seeing Chu Fengmian come out, Sui originally wanted to get up and greet him. However, her body was incomparably weak. She could only accept the elixirs and swallow them. Her tired face gradually returned to normal. In the blink of an eye, she had completely recovered. At the same time, the spiritual energy of the elixir did not dissipate. It suddenly condensed in Sui's body. Boom! A surge of spiritual energy fluctuation. Countless spiritual energy burst out from Sui's body. Her cultivation level reached the divine sea realm in an instant. This made Sui's eyes filled with disbelief. Her cultivation level was only in the 8th level of the body refining realm. Now, after swallowing this elixir, she broke through to the divine sea realm. Moreover, the spiritual energy of this elixir was gentle and long. It was not something that ordinary elixirs could compare to. Many elixirs could achieve this, but the medicinal strength was extremely overbearing. If 10 people swallowed it, 9 of them would die. Only one could successfully survive. However, the elixir given by Chu Fengmian could be swallowed by almost anyone. Senior, thank you for giving me this elixir. I will definitely repay you in the future. Sui stood up and expressed her gratitude to him. No worries. It's just a heaven-grade elixir. It's nothing to worry about. Where's the spiritual weapon that you refined? Let me have a look. Chu Fengmian smiled casually and said. For the current Chu Fengmian, an ordinary heaven-grade elixir was nothing. Chu Fengmian had obtained more than 10,000 heaven-grade elixirs from the returning ruined sky. Most of the elixirs were meaningless to Chu Fengmian. Taking out this one was indeed nothing to Chu Fengmian. A heaven-grade elixir. Sui had also guessed that the grade of the elixir would not be low. However, she did not expect it to be a heaven-grade elixir. A heaven-grade elixir that countless saints could not wait to fight for was now given to her by Chu Fengmian. Moreover, Chu Fengmian seemed to be playing it down. Who exactly is this person? My family Sui ancestor actually knew this person? Sui could not help but sigh in her heart. It was definitely her great fortune to have met Chu Fengmian. However, Sui quickly reacted. She picked up a spiritual sword beside her and handed it to Chu Fengmian. This is the spiritual weapon that my daughter refined. Top Earth grade? The moment Chu Fengmian received the spiritual sword, he roughly sensed the grade of the spiritual sword. The first spiritual weapon that Sui had refined had already reached the level of top Earth grade. The overall appearance of the spiritual weapon was not bad, but the details were a little rough. However, this was already beyond Chu Fengmian's imagination. Such aptitude could be considered a peerless genius in the Heavenly Soldier family Su. Chapter 807. Not bad. With such aptitude, perhaps you can really recreate the glory of the Heavenly Soldier family Su. Chu Fengmian looked at Suhi and said with a smile. He had a good relationship with the former Heavenly Soldier family Su. Now, the decline of the Heavenly Soldier family Su made Chu Fengmian sigh. However, Sui's aptitude was extremely outstanding among the Heavenly Soldier family Su generations. Let's go. I'll take you to a place. Chu Fengmian looked at Suhi with flickering eyes. He suddenly thought of something and said, Yes. Sui stood up and hurriedly packed her things, preparing to leave. Sui did not question Chu Fengmian's words and carried it out. If Chu Fengmian wanted to harm her, he would have killed her countless times. Moreover, with Chu Fengmian's current strength, killing her was as easy as killing an ant. However, Chu Fengmian imparted the art of forging to her. Becoming a master blacksmith was definitely more powerful than cultivating martial arts. She did not need to question Chu Fengmian's words. The two left the cave and flew in a certain direction. Along the way, Chu Fengmian walked and stopped, as if he was looking for something. Gradually, many barren mountains appeared in the surroundings. Among the mountains, not a single person could be seen. It was extremely barren. No cultivator would be willing to set foot in this place. Gradually, at the end of the mountains, there was a mountain peak shrouded in mist. The moment Chu Fengmian and Sui stepped into it, the surrounding space suddenly changed. The sky and earth spun, and a white mist appeared in front of them. The mist was bottomless. At a glance, they could not see what was behind the mist. Senior, where are we? Sui looked around and could not help but look at Chu Fengmian. This mountain peak was obviously very strange. The two of them walked in the white mist, but they seemed to be walking in the same place. It was as if they had come to a maze-like place. This made Sui curious as to why Chu Fengmian would bring her to such a place. This was a sacred place of the Heavenly Soldier family Su back then. Although the family Su was destroyed, this place should still be left behind. Chu Fengmian said without raising his head. His eyes were still scanning the surroundings as if he was searching for something. A sacred place of our family Su? Sui stared blankly at the endless white fog in front of him, and before he could speak again, all of a sudden, Chu Fengmian gathered his spiritual energy and struck out with his palm. The surrounding white mist was dispersed by his palm. A large bronze door suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. This bronze door gave off an extremely ancient aura. It was at least 10,000 years old, and it was likely that no one had opened it before. Drip your blood on the door. Chu Fengmian looked at Sui and said. Yes. Sui nodded and walked forward. Using his spiritual energy, he made a cut on his finger. A drop of blood landed on the bronze door with a flick of Sui's finger. Rumble. With this drop of blood, countless ancient runes suddenly condensed on the bronze door. The power contained within them was something that even Chu Fengmian could not break. This bronze door was the masterpiece of the Heavenly Soldier family Su. It was much more powerful than a heavenly-level spiritual artifact. Even those who transcended life and death could not break it. Unless it was a disciple of the family Su, no one could open this bronze door and enter. Kacha. Kacha. Under the condensation of the countless runes, the bronze door slowly opened. Chu Fengmian and Sui stepped into it. After entering, Chu Fengmian saw that behind the bronze door was an incomparably huge courtyard. There were more than 100 palaces in the courtyard. In the largest palace, bursts of earth fire suddenly gushed out. Above the earth fire was a huge furnace that was as tall as 10 people. The earth fire gushing out from the ground was absorbed by the huge furnace. There were a total of 9 incomparably huge dragon heads carved on the furnace. Each of the dragon heads was lifelike and looked no different from a real dragon head. The 9-Dragon Cauldron. This treasure is indeed here. It hasn't been taken by the people of the 7 major sects. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh when he saw the 9-Dragon Cauldron. The 9-Dragon Cauldron was the most precious treasure of the heavenly soldier family Su. Although it was not an extreme immortal weapon, its value was not inferior to an extreme immortal weapon. This was because most of the famous spiritual weapons refined by the heavenly soldier family Su came from the 9-Dragon Cauldron. The 3 most important points in refining spiritual weapons were the materials used, the blacksmith master who refined them, and the furnace used to refine them. The 9-Dragon Cauldron was definitely the most perfect furnace for refining spiritual weapons. Without the 9-Dragon Cauldron, the heavenly soldier family Su would no longer be the heavenly soldier family Su. For example, although the 7 major sects had destroyed the heavenly soldier family Su and obtained the refining techniques, they had not created a second heavenly soldier family Su in the entire 9 regions. What they lacked was the 9-Dragon Cauldron. This is the sacred land of the family Su? Sui looked at everything around her, her eyes filled with shock. These hundreds of palaces were even more prosperous than the Wang family Su he had met before. In particular, the warehouses were filled with refining materials. This kind of wealth was terrifying to the extreme. Yes, this is one of the sacred lands of the family Su. Chu Fengmian looked at Sui's shocked expression and could not help but sigh. Although Sui was a descendant of the family Su, he did not know how prosperous the family Su was back then. It was definitely much more prosperous than anyone could imagine. Back then, the Su clan had dozens of sacred grounds of various sizes. In fact, some of them were even larger and more prosperous than the Su clan. However, those sacred lands had probably been taken by the 7 major sects and would not be left behind. Only this one sacred place was unknown to most of the family Su's disciples at that time. Chu Fengmian had discovered it secretly. Otherwise, he would not have known that the family Su had such a sacred place. Here, you can properly practice your refining skills. There are almost inexhaustible materials here. You can use them as you wish. Chu Fengmian looked at Suhi and said, "This way, I can leave with peace of mind." Chapter 808. What? Senior, you're leaving? Suhi was shocked by Chu Fengmian's words. She didn't expect that Chu Fengmian would say that he was leaving. That's right. Chu Fengmian nodded. He couldn't stay here forever. Chu Fengmian still had to face many things, including the 7 major sects and the Northern Mang Academy. Chu Fengmian couldn't abandon all of them. Meeting an old friend made Chu Fengmian extremely happy, but Chu Fengmian still had to leave. Now that he had brought Suhi to this sacred ground and imparted the art of weapon crafting to her, it could be said that Suhi would be able to sit back and relax. There would be no danger at all, and he could let her cultivate the art of weapon crafting properly. All of this was enough. You can cultivate the blacksmithing Dao here, and you can also make a breakthrough. The family Su has declined, but I hope that the family Su can rise again because of you. Chu Fengmian's figure moved and disappeared from the courtyard. Only a pile of elixirs and spiritual stones were left at his feet. These were enough to support Sui's cultivation. The materials in the courtyard's warehouse were also enough for Sui's cultivation. What he had done was enough. As for where Sui could go, it would all depend on her own luck. It wasn't until Chu Fengmian left that Sui gradually regained her senses. She also knew that Chu Fengmian had his own things to do, and he couldn't stay here forever. She, Sui, could only cultivate until she became a blacksmith grandmaster. Only then would she be qualified to follow in Chu Fengmian's footsteps. The family Su hasn't sent anyone here for a long time. Child, come here. The 9-Dragon Cauldron in the palace slowly opened its mouth and called Sui over. The bronze gate closed once again after Chu Fengmian left. Outside, no one could imagine that there was another world in the white mist. After leaving the family Su Holy Land, Chu Fengmian did not hesitate to head to the nearest city. He used the teleportation formation to leave and return to the Beimang Academy. For Chu Fengmian, the Beimang Academy wasn't of much use to him. However, the Beimang Academy was the legacy of his eldest senior brother and his master, Xianbei Saint, who was also in the Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian naturally had to return to Beimang Academy. It took a total of 10 days. Chu Fengmian returned to the Northern Mang Academy through the teleportation formation and headed to the Northern Mang Sacred Region, his Sword Comprehension Peak. After the Sword Qi around Sword Comprehension Peak sensed Chu Fengmian's aura, it pushed aside and opened up a path for Chu Fengmian to enter. Who is it? The Sword Comprehension Peak's Sword Qi actually opened? The changes on Sword Comprehension Peak naturally could not escape the eyes of countless Northern Mang Sacred Region disciples. Many of these Northern Mang Sacred Region disciples were itching to enter Sword Comprehension Peak. Sword Comprehension Peak. Among the countless peaks in Northern Mang Sanctuary, it was considered to be the peak with the densest spiritual qi. Cultivating on it was simply a matter of leaps and bounds. Yi Tianjun had once obtained Sword Comprehension Peak and these people did not dare to pry into it. However, after Chu Fengmian destroyed the Saint Party, many people began to have thoughts about it. After all, everyone in the Beimang Academy knew about Yi Tianjun's power and no one dared to challenge his majesty. Although Chu Fengmian was now powerful and ranked first on the list of top 100 talents in the northern region, in the hearts of countless disciples, he still could not be compared to Yi Tianjun's deterrence. However, the Sword Qi around Sword Comprehension Peak was still there. Some of the Northern Mang Sacred Region's disciples were destroyed by the Sword Qi the moment they tried to get close to it. If it were not for the help of an old antique from Northern Mang Sacred Region who had transcended life and death, they would have died. Chu Fengmian is back. Seeing the changes on Sword Comprehension Peak, many disciples of Northern Mang Sacred Region knew that there was only one possibility. Chu Fengmian was back. Only Chu Fengmian's return could cause such changes on Sword Comprehension Peak. Chu Fengmian actually dares to come back. I thought he was going to die in the returning ruined sky. I didn't expect him to come back. A former disciple of the Saint Party saw Chu Fengmian's return and his eyes flashed coldly. Damn it, this person's strength is even stronger than before. He's not easy to deal with. Hanueli, who was with him, did not seem to come back. He might have died in the returning ruined sky. Some disciples of Northern Mang Sacred Region also noticed. This time, Chu Fengmian came back alone. Usually, Chu Fengmian and Hanueli were inseparable. However, this time, Chu Fengmian came back alone. It doesn't matter. Whoever comes back is seeking his own death this time. This person dares to come back. It seems that he has almost forgotten what happened before. A warrior with a ferocious face said. It was Meng Li. Saint Master is the genius of the Yi family. This person probably doesn't know who is the real powerful figure in Northern Mang Sacred Region. He dares to come back after offending the Yi family. This person is really tired of living. He's just a brat. He's really arrogant just because he got some opportunities. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the Yi clan, he's just like an ant. They can crush him with a finger. Just you wait, he's not far from death. Then, with a flicker of his body, he left the place. Chu Fengmian's return was known to everyone in the Northern Region Sacred Region within a day. Chu Fengmian participated in the martial arts competition, won the first place on the list of top 100 talents in the Northern Region, killed Yi Tianjun, and obtained a great opportunity in the returning ruined sky. All of this made Chu Fengmian high-spirited. However, many warriors sneered when they looked at Sword Comprehension Peak. Chu Fengmian had offended the Yi family. Although Xianbei Saint had protected him last time, Xianbei Saint could not protect Chu Fengmian forever. This time, the Yi family must kill Chu Fengmian directly. Many Northern Mang Sacred Region disciples were already looking at Sword Comprehension Peak, their eyes filled with greed. As long as Chu Fengmian died, Sword Comprehension Peak would become ownerless. At that time, anyone could fight for it. Master is not in Northern Mang Sacred Region. Chu Fengmian returned to Sword Comprehension Peak and scanned the entire Northern Mang Sacred Region with his spiritual senses. However, he did not sense Xianbei Saint's aura. This made Chu Fengmian frown. Chapter 809. Chu Fengmian's current strength was no longer the same as before. He had already stepped into the life and death realm. Compared to when Chu Fengmian left the North Mang Academy, he was many times stronger. His current spiritual consciousness was enough to see most of the North Mang sacred region. However, Chu Fengmian did not sense Xian Bei Saint's aura. It seemed like Xian Bei Saint had left the North Mang sacred region for some unknown reason. Chu Fengmian could vaguely sense Xian Bei Saint's strength. Xian Bei Saint had most likely stepped into the fifth step of the life and death steps, the divine object realm. Once a martial artist stepped into the divine object realm, his strength would undergo an earth-shattering change. Even in the 7 great sects, divine object realm martial artists could be considered as old antiques. They usually cultivated in the sacred grounds, wanting to break through to a higher level. It was rare for someone to appear outside, or even leave. Especially when Xian Bei Saint left, he did not leave any message, indicating that everything was abnormal. No matter what, it won't be easy for the Yi clan to deal with me. With my current strength, even if I meet Yi Mu, I won't be afraid. Chu Fengmian thought inwardly. He now possessed 400 strands of Supreme Sword Qi, and his cultivation base had already reached the 8th level of life and death realm. On top of that, he had mastered the 9-region sword art. With such strength, even if he met Yi Mu from the Yi clan, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Chu Fengmian was confident that he could kill Yi Mu. Chu Fengmian's strength was not inferior to some of the North Mang Academy's old antiques. If the North Mang Academy wanted to deal with him, they would have to pay a huge price. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had his own escape route, as long as he had Cloud Feather Palace as his last escape route. Even if Chu Fengmian was no match for Cloud Feather Palace, he could escape unscathed. Because of this, Chu Fengmian could return to the North Mang Academy without any fear. As he thought of this, Chu Fengmian wasn't too worried. He sat on the ground and took out the 3 tempered gold bamboos from his spatial ring. Quenched gold bamboo was difficult to find in the 9 regions. Generally speaking, it would only grow in places with rich metal qi. Sui was able to obtain the quenched gold bamboo because there was a lot of metal qi in his family Su's old house, which allowed the quenched gold bamboo to grow. These 3 quenching golden bamboos each had more than a dozen bamboo joints. Generally speaking, quenching golden bamboos were used to quench spiritual weapons. Just 1 bamboo joint was enough. These 3 quenching golden bamboos were enough to quench dozens of spiritual weapons. As long as it was a spirit weapon that had been tempered by gold quenching bamboo, it would be able to be reborn and its power would increase by more than double. In Chu Fengmian's era, it was an item that countless people fought over. Quenched divine weapon. Quenched divine weapon was an immortal weapon. Quenched weapon was. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's War Dragon Treasure Chariot, Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword, and Cloud Feather Palace could not be refined using the quenched gold bamboo's power. These 3 spirit weapons were the best among the heaven-grade spirit weapons. The quenched gold bamboo's power could not affect them. However, this did not mean that these 3 quenching golden bamboos were useless. Among the numerous spiritual weapons that Chu Fengmian possessed, one of them was the most suitable for quenching. It was the Black Mysterious Sword Array that he had personally refined. The Mysterious Black Sword Formation was refined by Chu Fengmian less than a year ago. The power in it had not been completely finalized. At this time, using the quenched gold bamboo to refine it was the best choice. Once the Mysterious Black Sword Formation was refined again by the quenched gold bamboo, the power of the Mysterious Black Sword Formation would skyrocket. Mysterious Black Sword Formation. Come out! Chu Fengmian shouted. The Mysterious Black Sword Formation flew out from Chu Fengmian's body. 100,000 spiritual swords hovered in the air. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and the 3 quenched gold bamboo flew into the air. In the Mysterious Black Sword Formation, all of them shattered and turned into golden particles. All of them were integrated into the 100,000 spiritual swords. If Chu Fengmian deliberately chose the more powerful spiritual swords in the mysterious black sword formation to refine, these 3 quenched gold bamboo would be enough to create dozens of heaven-grade spirit weapons. However, compared to the 100,000 spiritual swords in the mysterious black sword formation, the power produced by dozens of heaven-grade spirit weapons was just a drop in the bucket. The most powerful part of the mysterious black sword formation was the 100,000 spiritual swords. Once they were released, countless warriors would not be able to break through the layers. Therefore, Chu Fengmian chose to integrate the 3 quenched gold bamboo into the mysterious black sword formation. Although it could not transform the mysterious black sword formation, it was enough to increase the overall power of the mysterious black sword formation by countless times. This mysterious black sword formation is one of the trump cards that I rely on the most. The current power of the mysterious black sword formation is enough to trap several life-shattering realm warriors at the same time. Chu Fengmian felt that the power of the mysterious black sword formation was getting stronger and stronger, and he was extremely happy in his heart. Chu Fengmian had many fortuitous encounters. It could even be said that among the younger generation of disciples, there was absolutely no one who could compare with him in terms of fortuitous encounters. However, although Chu Fengmian had many fortuitous encounters, he did not dare to casually reveal most of them. For example, Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword, Battle Dragon Treasured Carriage, etc., Chu Fengmian could still use them. However, the Supreme Sword Qi, Emperor Jar, and even Chu Fengmian's Fortune Power, Natal Sword Origin, Cloud Feather Palace, etc., could not be exposed. Once exposed, any one of them would bring great danger to Chu Fengmian. Therefore, Chu Fengmian could not easily use them. The mysterious black sword formation could be regarded as one of the trump cards that Chu Fengmian could openly use. Therefore, Chu Fengmian urgently needed the mysterious black sword formation to transform. After all, the opponents that Chu Fengmian had to face now were not those life and death realm warriors, but many old antiques who had stepped onto the life and death steps. The stronger the mysterious black sword formation was, the more it would help Chu Fengmian. The power of the tempering gold bamboo was completely integrated into the mysterious black sword formation, gradually transforming the 100,000 spiritual swords within the mysterious black sword formation. At this moment, in a unique space within Northern Mang's sacred region, countless figures were traversing through it. Each and every one of these figures was definitely an old-timer. Even the weakest of them had the strength of a life-saving demolisher. Everyone had transcended life and death, and stepped onto the life and death steps. This was the true core of Northern Mang Academy, Northern Mang Palace. Chapter 8-10. Northern Mang Palace. In the Northern Mang Academy, there were only a few disciples who knew about the existence of Northern Mang Palace. In the Northern Mang Academy, only those whose strength had surpassed life and death and stepped onto the life and death steps were qualified to set foot in this place. The figures that appeared in Northern Mang Palace were all old antiques with extremely high status in the Northern Mang Academy. They were the true upper echelons of the Northern Mang Academy. The Northern Mang Academy had been passed down for 10,000 years. Although its true foundation could not be compared to the 7 great sects, it had already surpassed most of the sections. There were more than 100 figures in Northern Mang Palace. In the entire Northern Mang Academy, there were more than 100 people who had surpassed life and death. Among them, there were a few old men sitting at the top of Northern Mang Palace. The aura of each of them was extremely terrifying. These old antiques were people who had lived for an unknown number of years. They sat motionlessly in the void, but the aura emitted from their bodies was enough to shock others. There were many figures below, and a few of them were familiar to Chu Fengmian. Yimu of the Yi clan was also sitting below. The vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy and Yi Zongxing of the Yi clan were also seated below. However, this person's status was extremely high. The other figures beside him could not help but lower their heads to show their respect. Chu Fengmian came out of the returning ruined sky alive. According to the information, this person wantonly killed in the returning ruined sky and obtained countless treasures. Even the inheritance of the Colossus Cloud Feather Palace from 70,000 years ago was obtained by this person. It has been a long time since such a person has appeared among the disciples of our Northern Mang Academy. The inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace is an incomparably huge treasure. If our Northern Mang Academy wants to rise, we must obtain the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace. One of the figures said coldly. This figure was one of the old ancestors of the Northern Mang Academy, Old Ancestor Jianwang. He was an old ancestor who frequently appeared in the Northern Mang Sanctuary and was in charge of the various information of the Northern Mang Academy. The various news that Chu Fengmian had encountered in the End Ruined Sky could be hidden from others, but it was very difficult to hide from a colossus like the Northern Mang Academy. After all, the intelligence network of any powerful organization was more terrifying than one could imagine. Biming Academy wasn't the only one to know about this. News of Chu Fengmian obtaining Cloud Feather Palace's inheritance from Bottomless Ruined Sky had reached the 7 great sects as well. Even sects like Black Heaven sect had received the news. Just as old ancestor Jianwang's words faded, another figure stood up and spoke with a sharp tone. According to the news, the kid went on a killing spree in the Sinkhole Heaven. Almost all of the disciples of the 7 great sects were killed by him. Even the disciples of the Black Heaven sect and the Blazing Sun School were killed. This person is simply crazy to the extreme and has brought great trouble to our Northern Mang Academy. Why don't we capture this child and hand him over to the 7 great sects? This figure was Yimu. He had been holding a grudge for not killing Chu Fengmian previously. Now that Chu Fengmian had returned, the first person he wanted to kill was Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian's actions in Bottomless Ruined Sky had already reached the upper echelons of the academy. Even as a disciple of the Yi clan, he didn't dare to kill Chu Fengmian on his own accord. He could only wait until the academy made a decision before dealing with Chu Fengmian. Yimu is right. Our Northern Mang Academy has always kept a low profile and doesn't provoke the 7 great sections. However, this child is too arrogant. He wantonly slaughtered the disciples of the 7 great sects and caused a lot of trouble. If the 7 great sects blame us in the future, it won't be good for our academy. I agree to hand this child over to the 7 great sects, another figure said. It was an ancestor named Tian Nan. He supported Yimu as soon as he opened his mouth. If we hand Chu Fengmian over, what will happen to the many opportunities he has obtained and the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace? Great Ancestor Deng Ling, one of the vice principals of the Northern Sea Academy, said from another figure seated at the top. Chu Fengmian killed Sword Ancestor Desolation, War God Deer, and Saint Emperor Desolation in the ruins of End Heaven. It's said that Saint Emperor Desolation has already surpassed the life and death realm and reached the life-saving realm. He's no weaker than an ordinary patriarch. Our Northern Mang Academy has never seen such a genius in thousands of years. If we hand him over now, won't we miss a good opportunity to rise? Moreover, this child is Xian Bei's disciple and is considered loyal to our academy. Why don't we compensate the 7 great sects with some wealth to protect this child? Old Ancestor Deng Ling, the vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy, voiced a different opinion. Vice Principal Deng Ling, this child is a scourge. He is extremely arrogant. Leaving him in the academy will only bring disaster to us. How can we nurture him? Old Ancestor Yimu said with a sharp voice. What's more, this kid was just lucky and obtained a few more opportunities. As long as we capture this kid and force him to reveal all his opportunities, then extract his bloodline, it'll be enough to create another genius. At that time, we can hand this kid over to the 7 great sects, and it'll be enough to appease the anger of the 7 great sections. That's right. Although this Chu Fengmian is Xian Bei's disciple, he came out of nowhere. We have never heard of such a disciple before. Moreover, his strength is too strange. His progress is too fast. In just a few months, he broke through from the wind-resisting realm to the life and death realm. This speed is simply unheard of. I suspect that this child is a spy from the 7 great sects. Yi Zongxing, the vice principal of the Yi family, who had been sitting on the top of the palace, suddenly spoke. The 7 great sects have always wanted to annex our Northern Mang Academy. Everyone should know this. However, they have never found the opportunity. This time, this Chu Fengmian is very likely a spy from the 7 great sections. His strength should be suppressed through some special means. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to progress so fast. In any case, we must investigate this child. Even if our academy decides to nurture this child, we must know his background and make him confess everything. Only then can we make a conclusion. Old Ancestor Yimu said hurriedly. How about I capture him and bring him to the Northern Mang Palace? Under the watchful eyes of so many people, we'll know who this person is with just a glance. Chapter 8:11. No matter what, this kid is now an unstable bomb. If he's really a spy of the 7 major sects, then the academy will focus on nurturing this kid. It's very likely that it will cause trouble in the future. We have to guard against this. Yi Zongxing slowly opened his mouth. Right now, we only need to bring this child to this Northern Mang Palace and let him take out all of his fortuitous encounters. If there are no problems, then this child is naturally worthy of our Northern Mang Academy's nurturing. As for the 7 great sects, I can also compensate them. Yi Zongxing spoke with a glib tongue that no one could refute. In the Northern Mang Palace, countless figures were silent. Even Vice Principal Deng Ling, who previously supported Chu Fengmian, did not continue to speak. Indeed, Chu Fengmian's origin was still an extremely vague existence. Especially the various fortuitous encounters that Chu Fengmian had obtained, they were all rare fortuitous encounters in the 9 regions. None of this could be proven, nor could it convince everyone. All right, Deng Ling, you will bring Chu Fengmian here. Go and tell him that as long as he's not a spy of the 7 major sects and has no other intentions towards our Northern Mang Academy, our academy will not make things difficult for him. After a moment of silence, an ancient voice rang out from the depths of the palace. Clearly, it was an old antique of the Northern Mang Academy, a living fossil that spoke. When such a figure spoke, no one below dared to go against his decision. Yes. Deng Ling nodded his head and his body moved, gradually disappearing from the Northern Mang Palace. Seeing Deng Ling's departure, the Yi clan's ancestors revealed a cold smile at the corner of their mouths. On the Sword Comprehension Peak, Chu Fengmian was still cultivating his sword technique with his eyes closed, perfecting his 9-region sword technique. The fortuitous encounter that Chu Fengmian obtained in the returning ruined sky was simply beyond his imagination. Especially the sword technique recorded in the Cloud Feather Palace, it was the most powerful sword technique of that era. Chu Fengmian carefully comprehended it, which was enough to make his strength take another step forward. During this period of time, every time Chu Fengmian comprehended it, his sword technique would have a new breakthrough, and his strength would also become more powerful. Boom! Suddenly, a wave of spiritual energy fluctuation came from the Sword Comprehension Peak, and a figure suddenly appeared. The moment the figure appeared, Chu Fengmian seemed to have been prepared. As expected, the sword array around the Sword Comprehension Peak suddenly disappeared and turned into a passage. Oh! That figure was Vice Dean Deng Ling. When he saw the changes in Sword Comprehension Peak, he naturally understood that it was Chu Fengmian's arrangement. With a move of his body, he directly descended on the Sword Comprehension Peak. Vice Headmaster Deng Ling had just descended on Sword Comprehension Peak when she sensed a sharp sword aura from every corner of the peak. This sword intent was the sword realm that emanated from Chu Fengmian's body when he was practicing swordsmanship. It gradually permeated every inch of land on Sword Comprehension Peak. It could be said that the Sword Comprehension Peak could be considered a sacred training ground. If countless sword cultivators could train on it, they would be able to comprehend sword techniques. This person's swordsmanship has really reached the peak. Vice Principal Deng Ling was shocked to see this. Although Beimang Academy did not specialize in swordsmanship, there were still some sword principal experts in the academy. But even those old ancestors who had already transcended life and death did not have any swordsmanship that could be compared to Chu Fengmian. Vice Principal Deng Ling had long heard of Chu Fengmian's outstanding swordsmanship. But now, she truly understood what kind of realm Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship had reached. If this kid is really used by our Beimang Academy would not have to worry about prosperity. Unfortunately, the Yi clan is actually coming to deal with him. Vice Principal Deng Ling looked at Chu Fengmian and could not help but sigh. The Yi clan would definitely not let Chu Fengmian go. Chu Fengmian had killed the supreme genius of the Yi clan, Yi Tianjun. Even if it was him, it was impossible to protect Chu Fengmian. Which old ancestor has descended on my sword comprehension peak? Just when Vice Principal Deng Ling descended, Chu Fengmian's voice suddenly came from the cave of sword comprehension peak. Then, Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly crossed the space and appeared on the sword comprehension peak. I am Deng Ling, the Vice Principal of Beimang Academy. Vice Principal Deng Ling loudly shouted. This time, I'm here on the order of the Academy to bring you to the Beimang Palace. So it's Vice Principal Deng Ling. Chu Fengmian looked at Vice Principal Deng Ling and said with a calm face. Then let's go. Chu Fengmian already knew that since he had returned to the Beimang Academy, there would naturally be a day like this. After all, Chu Fengmian did not believe that the Yi clan would let him go so easily. Especially Yi Mu, who hated Chu Fengmian to the bone. Now, Vice Principal Deng Ling's arrival did not surprise Chu Fengmian. Oh? Looking at Chu Fengmian's calm expression, Vice Principal Deng Ling could not help but be shocked. Chu Fengmian's attitude was so calm. Chu Fengmian definitely knew that the Yi clan would not let go of this opportunity to deal with Chu Fengmian. The more it was like this, the more Vice Principal Deng Ling looked at Chu Fengmian calmly. Chu Fengmian, I'm acquainted with your master, the Xianbei Saint. This time, the Academy's higher-ups wanted you to go to the Beimang Palace. In fact, it was the Yi clan's idea. They said that you're a spy of the Beimang Academy and wanted you to prove your innocence. Since you're Xianbei's disciple, I naturally believe you. However, you have to be careful. The Yi clan's people can cover the sky with one hand among the higher-ups of the Beimang Academy. One of the founders of the Beimang Academy is a member of the Yi clan. Therefore, you have to be cautious and humble. You can't let the Yi clan find a reason to deal with you. It's fine to be a little humble, but you can't be impulsive and lose your life. Vice Principal Deng Ling warned. He was also unwilling to see Chu Fengmian die in the hands of the Yi clan, so he specially came to warn him. Many thanks. Chu Fengmian heard everything and nodded his head. His gaze was incomparably cold. Yi clan. Although he knew that the Yi clan would definitely choose to deal with Chu Fengmian, he did not expect that they would use such an excuse. Spy. With this excuse, the Yi clan could endlessly probe Chu Fengmian's trump card. Chu Fengmian's various fortuitous encounters must be revealed. All of his trump cards would be meaningless. However, if he did not reveal it, the fact that he was a spy would be enough to kill Chu Fengmian. Chapter 8:12. The Yi clan is ruthless. Chu Fengmian's heart turned cold after hearing Vice Principal Deng Ling's words. It seemed that the Yi clan wanted to kill Chu Fengmian no matter what, so they came up with such a scheme. If Chu Fengmian had been infiltrated by a spy, even Chu Fengmian's master, Xianbei Saint, would not be able to save Chu Fengmian. He might even be targeted by the Yi family. The Yi clan was indeed an existence that could cover the sky with one hand in this northern Mang Academy. However, there were also people like Chu Fengmian's master, Saint Xianbei, and Vice Principal Deng Ling. This made Chu Fengmian feel more at ease. At least the entire Beimang Academy had not fallen into the hands of the Yi clan. The Yi clan must not know that I have such strength now. They want to deal with me? Very well, it seems that this is the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. If I don't show enough strength, the Yi clan will bully me at any time. Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. The Yi clan, especially Yi Mu, was someone Chu Fengmian must kill. Previously at the martial competition, this person did not care about the rules and wanted to kill Chu Fengmian to save Yi Tianjun. Now, he turned the tables and blamed Chu Fengmian for it. Chu Fengmian's hatred could not be resolved if he did not kill such a person. Even if these people are against me, I can still force my way back to Cloud Feather Palace. Even if I'm in Beimang Palace, I can still return to Cloud Feather Palace at any time. With Elder Yun there, these people can't kill me. Chu Fengmian had already calculated his escape route. This time, if the higher-ups of the academy and the Yi clan wanted to kill Chu Fengmian, it would not be a pity even if Chu Fengmian had to fight to the death. As for bowing to the Yi clan, with Chu Fengmian's character, he would rather die than do that. I already know. Let's go. Chu Fengmian looked at Vice Principal Deng Ling and said calmly. Sigh, be careful. Vice Principal Deng Ling looked at Chu Fengmian's expression and naturally knew that such a prodigy of a generation would not be willing to lower his head. However, he could only advise Chu Fengmian. After all, the person that the Yi family wanted to deal with was Chu Fengmian. He didn't want to bring disaster upon himself. Vice Principal Deng Ling condensed her spiritual energy and suddenly shot out a unique rune. This unique rune belonged to the North Sea Academy and was a special symbol of the North Sea Academy. As the magical symbol shot into the air, a passageway appeared in front of him. Behind the passageway was an expanse of primal chaos. This is the method to enter Northern Mang Palace. With your current strength, you're no weaker than an ordinary life shatterer expert. Naturally, you're qualified to enter Northern Mang Palace. Take a good look. You can also come to Northern Mang Palace in the future. Vice Principal Deng Ling looked at Chu Fengmian and deliberately slowed down so that Chu Fengmian could remember the appearance of the rune. After the passageway opened, he took the lead and stepped into it. Chu Fengmian followed closely behind and also entered. Through the tunnel, Chu Fengmian followed Vice President Deng Ling to an extremely huge palace. The palace was filled with an ancient and chaotic aura. Primal Chaos Chi. The palace was filled with the most ancient Primal Chaos Chi. It was even more ancient than the Primal Chaos Chi that Chu Fengmian had seen in Saint Xianbei's cave. If one wanted to break through the life and death 9 layers, one must comprehend the origin. Primal Chaos was the origin of everything. Cultivating in the Northern Mang Palace was thousands of times faster than cultivating outside. Sure enough, those old fogies of the North Sea Academy usually don't appear outside. They're all hiding in Northern Mang Palace to cultivate. Chu Fengmian thought inwardly. Just like the North Sea Academy, there were only 4 or 5 old fogies who had transcended life and death 9 layers. For a force like the North Sea Academy that dominated the northern region, it was impossible for them to be so weak. Now that he was in Northern Mang Palace, Chu Fengmian saw hundreds of figures at a glance. Every one of them was a figure who had transcended life and death 9 layers. There were over 100 martial artists who had transcended life and death. This number was more or less what Chu Fengmian had imagined. The North Sea Academy's 10,000 years of accumulation was naturally enough to cultivate some experts that belonged to them. This was the foundation of the North Sea Academy. If all of these people were to fall, the North Sea Academy could be considered to be destroyed. It would no longer be able to establish itself in the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian, why aren't you kneeling down? Speak of your sins in front of countless old ancestors. The moment Chu Fengmian stepped into Northern Mang Palace, a sharp voice suddenly shouted out from the surrounding thrones. It was Yimu. He stared at Chu Fengmian with eyes filled with murderous intent. It was as if he could not wait to kill Chu Fengmian. He was as crazy as a devil. Kneel down? Sins? What sins have I, Chu Fengmian, committed? Chu Fengmian said indifferently after hearing Yimu's words. Yimu, you once disregarded the rules during the martial competition and tried to kill me. The one who truly committed sins is you. You want me to kneel down? I think the one who should kneel is you. Chu Fengmian pointed at Yimu as his words were like thunder. Chu Fengmian's action startled Vice Principal Deng Ling, who was beside him. Originally, he brought Chu Fengmian to Northern Mang Palace to make Chu Fengmian lower his head and appease the anger of the Yi clan. This way, the Yi clan wouldn't be able to find an excuse to deal with Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian's words showed that he didn't put the Yi clan in his eyes. Chu Fengmian, what sins have you committed? Don't you know? You've caused so much trouble for my North Sea Academy. Now, the people of the 7 great sects are filled with anger. Quickly hand over all your fortuitous encounters, Then take the initiative to go to the 7 great sects and kill yourself to atone for your sins. This is what you should do now. Another voice suddenly sounded. It was the Lu clan's old ancestor, Lu Qianren. When Chu Fengmian tried to kill Lu Hua, he suddenly intervened and saved Lu Hua. At that time, he even wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Fortunately, Saint Xianbei had saved Chu Fengmian and saved him from danger. It seemed that this time, all of Chu Fengmian's enemies had gathered together. You came to Northern Mang Palace, but you still don't repent. You don't even put the old ancestors in your eyes. Very well, since Xianbei won't discipline you, I will. Lu Qianren suddenly roared. His body suddenly flew out from the throne, condensed spiritual energy, and bombarded Chu Fengmian with a palm. He relied on his status to attack. As an old ancestor, he naturally had the status to teach a disciple a lesson. His sudden attack didn't cause any reaction from the other old ancestors. Chu Fengmian looked at Lu Qianren, the corner of his mouth twitching as he spoke word by word. Lu Qianren, are you courting death? Chapter 8:13. Lu Qianren was the ancestor of Baiming Academy. As for Chu Fengmian, he was, at best, a core disciple. It was only right and proper for an ancestor to reprimand a disciple to kneel. However, Chu Fengmian had never paid attention to the status of an ancestor or a disciple. Lu Qianren, do you want to die? His words caused the expressions of countless ancestors to change. They had reprimanded countless disciples in the past, but none had dared to resist. This is bad. Chu Fengmian, hurry up and apologize to Ancestor Lu Qianren. Ask him to forgive your recklessness. Vice Principal Deng Ling hurriedly said to Chu Fengmian. Whether it was the Lu family or the Yi family, they both hated Chu Fengmian to the bone. They had always wanted to find an opportunity to kill him. Now that Chu Fengmian had said this, it gave them a perfect excuse to kill Chu Fengmian. Apologize? How laughable. According to the rules, insulting an ancestor is a crime punishable by death. Die, boy! Lu Qianren's expression was ferocious to the extreme. His hair stood on end, filled with anger. He looked like a mad lion. The spiritual energy in his palm gradually condensed into a 9-floored pagoda. He charged directly at Chu Fengmian, intending to kill him. Is that so? Lu Qianren, do you think you can kill me? I came back to kill you. Very well. Since you dare to attack, I'll kill you now. Chu Fengmian glared at Lu Qianren, his eyes filled with killing intent. A mere life-saving ancestor wanted to kill Chu Fengmian? Break for me. Chu Fengmian abruptly struck out with his palm. The wind from his palm transformed into a long dragon and rushed forward amidst the rumbling sound. The 9-story pagoda was shattered on the spot, and the dragon charged at Lu Qianren. Lu Qianren, a piece of trash like you dares to call yourself an ancestor? I'll use your blood to wash away my hatred. Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. The 9-story pagoda shattered under Chu Fengmian's palm. It was as if all of Lu Qianren's power had been scattered in an instant. Most of the power landed on Lu Qianren's chest. Pooh! Lu Qianren's chest was smashed to pieces. His body flew back dozens of kilometers before finally coming to a stop. More than half of his blood essence had been destroyed by the palm strike, and his spiritual power was incomparably weak. What? How is this possible? Many patriarchs in the Northern Mang Palace were shocked when they saw this result. Not a single one of them had expected this to happen. After all, Lu Qianren was a life-saving patriarch. Furthermore, he hadn't just recently broken through to the life-saving level. Instead, he had been accumulating power for quite some time. Even though it was rumored that Chu Fengmian had the strength to defeat life-saving experts, in the eyes of the crowd, Chu Fengmian would at most be able to defeat life-saving experts who had just broken through. No one could have imagined that Lu Qianren would be defeated so miserably by this palm. Such an ancestor was seriously injured on the spot and was on the verge of death. None of the surrounding patriarchs had thought of this, so no one stopped him. By the time they reacted, Lu Qianren was already seriously injured. What a powerful force! Vice Principal Deng Ling, who was standing beside Chu Fengmian, was shocked to the extreme. Standing beside Chu Fengmian, he could clearly feel the power Chu Fengmian had used just now. Chu Fengmian didn't use any martial skills, only pure strength. According to his understanding, Chu Fengmian's strongest point should be his swordsmanship. Chu Fengmian's unparalleled swordsmanship was a fact known to everyone in the 9 regions. But now, Chu Fengmian had defeated Lu Qianren with ease. He had not used any sword techniques, nor had he used any martial skills. Chu Fengmian's strength was much more terrifying than he had imagined. Vice Principal Deng Ling suddenly understood that Chu Fengmian didn't come to the Northern Ming Palace to offer a humble apology, but to make a scene. Bastard, how dare you injure an ancestor? Hurry up and kneel down. Hand over all your fortuitous encounters and cripple your cultivation. I can even leave your corpse intact. Yimu looked at Chu Fengmian and shouted in a sharp voice. Ancestors, did you see that? Chu Fengmian is arrogant and unruly. He's definitely a disaster for our Northern Mang Academy. If we don't kill him today, he'll definitely topple our Northern Mang Academy in the future. Our Northern Mang Academy will be destroyed by this kid. That's right. Ancestors, this kid is arrogant. He injured an ancestor and made a scene in the Northern Mang Palace. His crimes are unforgivable. I'll capture him now and let the ancestors judge him. The vice principal of the Yi family, Yi Zongxing, also shouted loudly. A group of Yi family ancestors, as well as those who had a good relationship with the Yi family, shouted one by one. Yes, capture this kid. This kid's strength is too strange. He must be a spy from the 7 major sections. We must capture him. Find out everything. That's right. The fortuitous encounters he obtained all belong to our Northern Mang Academy. I have a soul extraction technique that can torture his soul. When the time comes, he'll definitely spill it. Also, his master is Xian Bei. If Xian Bei is willing to accept him as a disciple, he must have something to do with the 7 major sects. Kill! This kind of person can't stay in our Northern Mang Academy. We must kill him today. The crowd was stirred up. Everyone looked at Chu Fengmian with murderous intent. Chu Fengmian, kneel down. You still want to resist? Fine, I'll cripple your cultivation and extract your bloodline. Let's see how you're going to resist. Yimu looked at Chu Fengmian and shouted in a sharp voice. He slapped the throne and stood up abruptly. Behind him, a long saber was suddenly unsheathed. The blade flashed and broke the space, directly attacking Chu Fengmian. The sudden appearance of the saber was simply a silent sneak attack on Chu Fengmian's back. When Yimu's ancestor made his move, the blade was already close to Chu Fengmian's back. Chu Fengmian didn't even have time to react. It was obviously very sinister. Without waiting for Chu Fengmian to react, he wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Die! Kid, you killed a genius of the Yi family. Today, I'll use your blood as a sacrifice. Yimu's ancestor roared with a ferocious face. Battle Dragon Carriage. Just as the blade approached Chu Fengmian, the Battle Dragon Carriage suddenly appeared under Chu Fengmian's seat. The umbrella on the carriage suddenly opened and emitted a 7-colored light. When the blade touched the 7-colored light, it shattered and dissipated into thin air. Chapter 8:14. What's that? A Mount Spirit tool can actually block Yimu's blade? Countless old ancestors in the Northern Mang Palace were shocked to see Yimu's blade being easily broken by the War Dragon treasure carriage. Yimu's old ancestor was no longer someone who had just transcended life and death. His realm had already surpassed the life-shattering realm and reached the second step of the life and death steps, the undying realm. Not to mention a life and death realm martial artist, even a life-shattering realm martial artist would have to pay a huge price to block his blade. However, the War Dragon treasure chariot was actually able to easily block it. Heaven-grade spirit tool. This carriage is also a heaven-grade spirit tool. This guy actually had another opportunity. The grade of this carriage isn't below the ancestral dragon supreme sword. What kind of spirit tool is it? Some old ancestors looked at Chu Fengmian with jealousy. They were all old ancestors of North Mang Academy, people who had transcended life and death. Even in the 9 regions, they would have a high status and be respected. But Chu Fengmian was only a life and death realm martial artist, and yet he had such a powerful spirit tool. Normally, these old ancestors could only have some ordinary heaven-grade spirit tools. They weren't qualified to have heaven-grade spirit tools like the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword and the Battle Dragon Carriage. But Chu Fengmian was only a life and death realm martial artist and a disciple of North Mang Academy. Not only did he have the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword, but he also had the Battle Dragon Carriage. How could these old ancestors not be jealous? Especially the old ancestors of Yi Clan. They couldn't wait to kill Chu Fengmian and take all his treasures. Yimu, you want to kill me? What a joke. So what if you're in the life and death realm? In front of me, you're just an ant. Die. Chu Fengmian looked at Yimu's old ancestor and suddenly laughed. Beneath him, the 8 primordial war dragons on the war dragon treasure chariot suddenly roared and charged towards Patriarch Yimu. Rumble. It was so fast that in an instant, a beam of light pierced through Patriarch Yimu's chest. A primordial ancient roared and slashed out with its claw. The Patriarch's chest was shattered, and he was sent flying dozens of kilometers away. After the collision, even Yimu, who was in the Undying Realm, was severely injured. Vice Dean Deng Ling, who was standing beside Chu Fengmian, had a dumbfounded expression. Everything that was happening before his eyes was simply beyond his expectations. It wasn't just Lu Qianren. Even Night Herder couldn't fight back against Chu Fengmian. A mere disciple was enough to beat up an ancestor who transcended life and death. If he hadn't seen all of this with his own eyes, no one in the 9 regions would have believed it even if it was spread out. What terrifying power! What is the origin of this treasured carriage? 8 primordial war dragons pulling the chariot with a canopy covering it. Is this the most valuable treasure of 9 Demon City, the heavenly demon treasure carriage? One of the progenitors suddenly yelled. He seemed to have seen through the true identity of the war dragon treasure carriage. In the 9 regions, such a treasured carriage couldn't possibly be a nameless existence. After thinking about it for a moment, he suddenly shouted out loud, "What? What? It's the heavenly demon treasure carriage? Isn't this the most valuable treasure of 9 Demon City? Isn't it the carriage of 9 Demon City's demon lord? How did it fall into this kid's hands?" I heard that this time, the little demon lord of 9 Demon City also entered the returning ruined sky. I'm afraid that he brought the heavenly demon treasure carriage with him. But in the end, he died in the hands of this kid and obtained it. Good luck. This kid's luck is simply heaven-defying. Such a treasure has fallen into his hands. Each of the elders looked at Chu Fengmian with a different gaze. Some were emotional, some were excited, some were greedy, and some were filled with killing intent. This kid's strength is too terrifying. Even an Undying Realm expert is no match for him when he controls the carriage. Is he really a life and death realm expert? Chu Fengmian sat quietly on the war dragon chariot after dealing with Night Shepherd Patriarch. At this moment, the progenitors who were clamoring to kill Chu Fengmian were all silent. If Chu Fengmian was only a life and death realm expert, it would be easy to deal with him. For these progenitors, life and death realm experts were like ants. They could do whatever they wanted with them. But now, Chu Fengmian's strength was no different from them. This kind of strength was enough to be on equal footing with them. Even if they wanted to deal with Chu Fengmian, it wouldn't be an easy task. Countless progenitors looked at Chu Fengmian with flickering eyes. They were all thinking about something. Now that Chu Fengmian was called to the Northern Mang Palace, it was actually because of the Yi clan. Chu Fengmian had killed Yi Tianjun. This matter was known to all the ancestors present, so the Yi clan had always wanted to deal with Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian's strength wasn't enough, they wouldn't mind doing Yi clan a favor and come forward to deal with Chu Fengmian. But now, Chu Fengmian's strength was enough to be on equal footing with them. He even surpassed some of the progenitors present. If they were to go against Chu Fengmian, they would be provoking an opponent like Chu Fengmian. To them, this wasn't a wise choice. Chu Fengmian, how dare you? Kneel down. How dare you be so arrogant in front of so many progenitors in the northern Mang Palace? Yi Zongxing looked at Chu Fengmian with flickering eyes and suddenly roared. No matter how strong you are now, you're just a disciple of our North Sea Academy. It's a matter of course for the ancestor to teach a disciple a lesson. However, you went against the ancestor and even injured 2 ancestors. You're simply unruly and unruly, you're a devil. Progenitors, I implore you to give the order to capture this kid. Such a person can't be allowed to stay in our Northern Mang Academy. Unruly? Devil? Why, only your Yi clan is allowed to kill me and I can't resist. Chu Fengmian looked at Yi Zongxing with a sarcastic smile. Moreover, I'm just a disciple. Northern Mang Academy has always respected strength. Why, is it that I'm not worthy of being called an ancestor with my strength? You haven't transcended life and death, so you can only be a disciple of our Northern Mang Academy. I'm the vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy. When you see me, you must kneel down and speak. Yi Zongxing looked at Chu Fengmian and shouted coldly. Is that so? Chu Fengmian raised the corner of his mouth and said contemptuously. Unfortunately, in my opinion, even you, the vice principal, are just trash. Chapter 8:15. Chu Fengmian, you. Vice President Deng Ling's voice trembled when she heard Chu Fengmian's words. She hurriedly said to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian, do you want to die? How dare you speak to the vice principal like that? Hurry up and beg for mercy. That's the only way to save your life. Vice Principal Deng Ling tried to dissuade Chu Fengmian while sending him a telepathic message. Kid, Yi Zongxing isn't the same as Yi Mu. As the vice principal of Northern Mang Academy, he has already reached the unblemished state. You're no match for him. Hurry up and apologize. Given your strength, the ancestors can't really kill you. So what if I'm in the unblemished state? Chu Fengmian's disdain didn't change after hearing Vice Principal Deng Ling's words. He was naturally aware of Yi Zongxing's realm, but so what? Yi Zongxing, in my opinion, you're worse than a dog. How can you be the vice principal of Northern Mang Academy? You say I'm not strong enough? Alright, then do you dare to come and fight me? Chu Fengmian pointed at Yi Zongxing and spoke word by word. If you can't even defeat a small disciple like me, then you really aren't qualified to be the vice principal of Northern Mang Academy. Uproar. Chu Fengmian's words made the expressions of countless ancestors change one after another. Many of them could see that Chu Fengmian had come here to show off and slap the Yi family's face. Defeating Lu Qianren and Yi Mu was already a slap to the Yi family's face. But now, Chu Fengmian didn't stop and wanted to fight Yi Zongxing. Yi Zongxing could be considered a well-known figure among the countless ancestors of the Yi family. As the vice principal of Northern Mang Academy, he had a high status among the countless ancestors. Now, Chu Fengmian's words had forced Yi Zongxing into a dead end. If he said Chu Fengmian wasn't strong enough, then Chu Fengmian would have to show his strength. That brat is crazy. Yi Zongxing is far from someone like Yi Mu's old ancestor. Forget it. This kid has encountered countless fortuitous encounters at such a young age. It's normal for him to be proud and arrogant. I'll just let him suffer this loss. However, I'm afraid that Yi Zongxing won't show any mercy. Let's hope that this kid can survive from Yi Zongxing. Countless elders looked at Chu Fengmian and shook their heads. Many of them felt that Chu Fengmian was too reckless. Chu Fengmian had defeated Lu Qianren and Yi Mu. He had already achieved his goal. Now, as long as he admitted defeat, Yi Zongxing would have no reason to deal with Chu Fengmian. At that time, Chu Fengmian would rise to the position of patriarch and his status would skyrocket. It would not be easy for the Yi clan to deal with Chu Fengmian. But now, Chu Fengmian was actually challenging Yi Zongxing. This was indeed a reckless thing to do. Kid, you want to challenge me? Yi Zongxing looked at Chu Fengmian. His expression didn't change, but he was overjoyed. Chu Fengmian came to Beimang Palace and showed off his strength. He had no way to deal with Chu Fengmian. He could only use his status to threaten Chu Fengmian. Now that Chu Fengmian wanted to challenge him, it gave him the perfect opportunity to kill Chu Fengmian. Alright, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Kid, make your move. Yi Zongxing stood with his hands behind his back and looked at Chu Fengmian with disdain. He was at the fourth step of the life and death steps, an unblemished expert. Even if Chu Fengmian defeated Yi Mu, he was still an ant in his eyes. Is that so? If I make my move, you won't have the slightest chance. Chu Fengmian sat on the War Dragon treasure carriage and looked at Yi Zongxing with disdain. Make your move. I'll give you a chance so that you won't die in peace. Damn it. Yi Zongxing didn't even finish his sentence. His face was already burning with rage. Given his status, he had always treated Chu Fengmian like an ant. But now, he was being looked down upon by an ant-like person, who even looked down on him. With his status, when had he ever been looked down upon like this? Yi Zongxing couldn't care less about his status. He suddenly made his move. A long blade was suddenly unsheathed from his hand. The blade was 10 times more terrifying than Yi Mu's blade. The sky was filled with tens of thousands of blades, turning the surroundings into a world of blades. Chu Fengmian was in the middle of these countless blades. All of them were aimed at Chu Fengmian. Yi Zongxing's move was swift and fierce. He didn't give Chu Fengmian any chance to escape. His anger was only because he wanted to kill Chu Fengmian as soon as possible. That was the only way to quell the anger in his heart. The sky was filled with blades. Under his control, all of them were aimed at Chu Fengmian. Yi Zongxing's move is too ruthless. The blade is unsheathed. This brat has no chance. Countless ancestors shook their heads when they saw Yi Zongxing's move. There was no turning back once the blade was unsheathed. Yi Zongxing's move was to not give Chu Fengmian any chance to escape. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Sword break. Facing the countless blades, Chu Fengmian smiled. Chu Fengmian's lips curled upward. The ancestral dragon supreme sword was drawn out from its scabbard all of a sudden. A sharp edge was fired upward, aiming at the sabers. The moment the sword light slashed out, the countless swords turned into a long river. The countless blade edges were instantly parted by the river. Not a single one of the tens of thousands of blade edges could actually harm Chu Fengmian. What sword technique is this? This aura is the aura of the Sacred Hall. It's the sword technique of Saint Lord Beimang. This brat has really obtained the inheritance of Saint Lord Beimang. Sensing the sword intent contained in Chu Fengmian's blade, many of the patriarchs present shouted loudly. They were naturally familiar with the sword intent. It was Saint Lord Beimang's sword intent. What a monster! I thought the rumor was fake. I didn't expect it to be true. This brat has really obtained the inheritance of Saint Lord Beimang. No one in our Beimang Academy has ever obtained the inheritance of Saint Lord Beimang in the past 10,000 years. What kind of monster is this brat? His sword technique is so terrifying. Saint Lord Beimang's inheritance? Sword technique? Yi Zongxing's eyes flickered as a cruel look appeared on his face. Brat, it's no wonder you're so arrogant. You've actually comprehended Saint Lord Beimang's sword technique. Unfortunately, no matter how monstrous you are, the difference in cultivation realm isn't something you can make up for. Chapter 8:16. Yi Zongxing didn't expect Chu Fengmian to be able to block his blade. Yi Zongxing was the vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy, someone who had reached the unblemished realm. Yet, he couldn't defeat Chu Fengmian in one move. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Yi Zongxing's face revealed a hint of anger. With his status, being unable to defeat Chu Fengmian in one move was simply a disgrace. An ominous glint appeared in Yi Zongxing's eyes. Chu Fengmian's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations, but it was precisely because of this that his killing intent towards Chu Fengmian grew even stronger. A life-and-death realm martial artist with such terrifying strength was simply too monstrous. Such a monstrous genius. He must die. Yi Zongxing's eyes were filled with dread. If Chu Fengmian survived this time and stepped onto the life-and-death steps, he would be able to stand on equal footing with them. How terrifying would Chu Fengmian's strength be then? Yi Zongxing didn't doubt that with Chu Fengmian's qualifications, stepping onto the life-and-death steps wouldn't be a difficult matter. Blade's descent. Countless blades suddenly revolved around Yi Zongxing's body. Waves of blade intent shrouded his body, making him look like a sharp blade. Kill! Yi Zongxing shouted coldly. The sword intent on his body instantly condensed, and a wave of killing intent immediately engulfed the surrounding area. The shroud of killing intent made Yi Zongxing seem like the incarnation of the god of death. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. Massacre's physique. Yi Zongxing is actually using the power of Massacre's physique. Many old ancestors were extremely shocked by Yi Zongxing's transformation. For many of them, this was the first time they had seen Yi Zongxing use his full strength. Only a few old ancestors with extremely high qualifications knew that this was Yi Zongxing's true strength. It was one of the innate godly physiques, Massacre's physique. Among the countless innate godly physiques, it was known as the Massacre's physique. It was said that when one reached the limit, they could turn into a killing god and kill everything in the world. Massacre's physique? I didn't expect you to be hiding such strength. Yi Zongxing had concealed his strength deeply. Even Chu Fengmian had only just realized that Yi Zongxing was actually a genius with an innate godly physique. To be able to become the vice principal of the Beimang Academy, there was no need to doubt Yi Zongxing's strength. So what if I have the Slaughter's physique? You're just an innate divine body ranked in the top 100. Even Yi Tianjun, who had the divine body of chaos ranked in the top 10, was killed by me. What can you, a massacre body, do? Chu Fengmian looked at Yi Zongxing and sneered. As he spoke, the sword in his hand moved again. The sword light entered the light and turned into 10 ancient battle dragons. They roared at the same time and swept towards Yi Zongxing. Dragon-like sword edge. Each primordial war dragon was formed by extremely powerful sword chi. Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship and the power of his bloodline had fused into one. The 10 primordial war dragons joined forces and swept towards Yi Zongxing. There was almost no flaw in their attack. Damn it! Die for me! Jianwang. Hearing Chu Fengmian mention Yi Tianjun, Yi Zongxing's face became even more furious. His anger was written all over his face, making him go crazy. In the 10,000 years of the Yi clan's history, there had never been a genius like Yi Tianjun. The divine body of chaos ranked in the top 10 among the countless innate divine bodies in the entire 9 regions. However, such a genius had died in the hands of Chu Fengmian. This hatred was absolutely irreconcilable. Boom! 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 With Yi Zongxing's anger, the murderous intent on his body became even more intense. His blade moved. This slash was filled with a layer of blood chi. It immediately slashed towards one of the primordial war dragons. With one slash, this primordial war dragon was immediately killed. The sword edge contained within could not compete with Yi Zongxing's blade. Go to hell, kid. Yi Zongxing did not intend to give Chu Fengmian any more chances after gaining the upper hand. His blade fell again and directly slashed towards Chu Fengmian. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian completely. The remaining 9 primordial war dragons roared at the same time and charged forward. However, in the face of this blade, all of them were annihilated in an instant. Unblemished realm, massacre body. Yi Zongxing's strength was 10 times, no, 100 times stronger than Yi Mu and the others. War dragon carriage. Chu Fengmian sat down and the umbrella on the war dragon carriage suddenly opened. 7 colored light blocked in front of Chu Fengmian and suddenly collided with the blade. Crack! A crisp sound was heard. The blade slashed the 7 colored light. Suddenly, the 7 colored light could not withstand the attack and was directly shattered. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's body was also resisting the blade. Seeing this scene, the corner of Yi Zongxing's mouth curled into a cold smile. He did not believe that Chu Fengmian could withstand his blade. In his heart, the next scene should be Chu Fengmian dying under the edge of his blade, the moment when he was completely annihilated. Crack! 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 However, when he looked over, the scene in front of him was completely different from what he had imagined. The blade slashed on Chu Fengmian's body and produced countless sparks. It looked as if it had slashed on an extremely sturdy spiritual weapon. At this moment, the blade could not cut Chu Fengmian's body in half. What a sturdy body! What kind of body is this? Can it withstand the blade? Countless patriarchs were so shocked that their eyes almost fell out of their sockets when they saw this scene. Even if they tried to block Yi Zongxing's blade, most of them would not be able to block it. They would most likely be killed in one strike. Even if they could withstand it, they would have to use countless means to do so. It was almost unimaginable to withstand it with one's flesh and blood. However, Chu Fengmian was actually withstanding Yi Zongxing's blade with his flesh and blood. Damn it! Yi Zongxing did not expect Chu Fengmian's body to be so sturdy. Although the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot and the 9 ancient battle dragons had already reduced the blade's power to 1%, Yi Zongxing did not expect Chu Fengmian's body to be so sturdy. However, he still did not expect Chu Fengmian to be able to withstand it with his flesh and blood. There was no time for hesitation. Yi Zongxing once again gathered his spiritual power and slashed at Chu Fengmian with another blade. He was determined to kill Chu Fengmian. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian completely. Not bad. Your strength is indeed beyond my imagination. Chu Fengmian looked at Yi Zongxing and sneered. You are qualified for me to use my full strength. Chapter 8:17. You are qualified for me to use my full strength. The progenitors were stunned upon hearing this. At this time, Chu Fengmian still had a trump card? Or rather, he hadn't used his full strength. A life and death martial artist was actually hiding his strength to deal with a flawless realm ancestor? Even Yi Zongxing's pupils rapidly shrunk when he heard these words. Clearly, he was incomparably fearful. However, Yi Zongxing quickly revealed a cold smile. No matter how many fortuitous encounters Chu Fengmian had and how monstrous he was still only at the 8th level of life and death realm. How could a life and death martial artist contend against him? Do you think you can still be so stubborn when death is at hand? Die! As Yi Zongxing spoke, his mind moved, and his blade became even faster and sharper. It was directly aimed at Chu Fengmian's chest. Supreme Sword Qi, come out. Facing the incoming blade, Chu Fengmian only spat out a few words indifferently. Streams of sword Qi suddenly appeared beside him. The moment the sword Qi appeared, Chu Fengmian's appearance became completely different from how it had been a moment ago. The sword intent Chu Fengmian had just displayed was incomparably sharp. Everyone who saw it couldn't help but want to retreat. But now, when the Supreme Sword Qi appeared, Chu Fengmian's sword intent was 10 times, 100 times more terrifying than before. This sword intent was simply unparalleled in the world. In the hearts of countless ancestors, they had never imagined that a person's sword intent could reach such a terrifying level. Especially when the owner of this sword intent was merely a disciple of their North Sea Academy, a life and death martial artist. Break! Chu Fengmian coldly shouted. The 400 Supreme Sword Qi suddenly merged into one, transforming into a sword array that suddenly pierced forward. Yi Zongxing's blade was shattered in an instant. In front of this Supreme Sword Qi, it seemed that no matter what kind of power it was, it would be directly destroyed. What is this thing? The moment Yi Zongxing saw the 400 Supreme Sword Qi, his eyes were also filled with deep fear. He could also see that Chu Fengmian's aura had undergone earth-shattering changes. Moreover, it wasn't just his aura. Chu Fengmian's strength had also skyrocketed by 12 times, or even 100 times. All these changes were due to the sudden appearance of the Supreme Sword Qi. Yi Zongxing could sense the terrifying sword intent contained within each of these supreme sword qi. They were all at the pinnacle of sword intent. There were actually 400 of these supreme sword qi. Yi Zongxing, do you really think you're my opponent? I'm just borrowing your hand to see what level my strength has reached. Now, you no longer have any meaning, so you can die. Chu Fengmian looked at Yi Zongxing, coldly. If Chu Fengmian wanted to kill Yi Zongxing, he could have used his supreme sword energy right from the start and killed him completely. However, Chu Fengmian chose not to do so. Chu Fengmian also wanted to see what level his strength had reached, so he didn't use the supreme sword qi. Now, it seemed that Chu Fengmian could defeat the first 3 steps of the life and death steps even without using his supreme sword qi. But if he used his supreme sword qi, Yi Zongxing wouldn't be his opponent. Whoosh! 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 As Chu Fengmian spoke, the 400 supreme sword qi changed again, all of them merging into the sword in Chu Fengmian's hand, making his sword 100 times more terrifying than before. Boom! As the sword slashed through the air, the surrounding layers of space were completely destroyed. At the same time, the sword light had already locked onto Yi Zongxing's body. Even if Yi Zongxing wanted to escape, he couldn't. Slaughter heaven and earth. Yi Zongxing's face changed drastically when he saw the sword light coming. He could vaguely see how terrifying the sword light was. The current Chu Fengmian was no longer the same as before. The long saber in his hand moved once again. The murderous intent that filled the sky was all integrated into the edge of his saber. Another saber suddenly slashed out. This saber was his supreme killing move. Once it was unleashed, a sea of blood suddenly appeared in the sky. The power of this sea of blood crushed towards Chu Fengmian. The terrifying killing intent of this sea of blood wanted to crush Chu Fengmian completely. It's useless. Chu Fengmian only smiled coldly when he saw Yi Zongxing's action. His sword light pierced through like a rainbow. The sea of blood that filled the sky was directly split apart by the sword light. The sea of blood in the sky seemed to be endless and vast. But in front of the sword light, it couldn't withstand a single blow and was directly split apart. The sword was already piercing towards Yi Zongxing's chest. Save me! Ancestor, save me! Yi Zongxing suddenly shouted towards the depths of the northern Ming Palace in this moment of crisis. At this moment of life and death, Yi Zongxing no longer cared about his face as the vice principal. He didn't want to die in Chu Fengmian's hands. This scene made the surrounding ancestors suck in a breath of cold air. The vice principal of the Northern Ming Academy, Yi Zongxing, who possessed the massacre body, was forced to such a state by Chu Fengmian. He was even about to be killed. All of this was done by a life and death martial artist. Even in the history of the 9 regions, a peerless genius like Chu Fengmian had never appeared before. While everyone was discussing, an extremely ancient existence seemed to have heard Yi Zongxing's words from the depths of the northern Ming Palace. It suddenly woke up and sent a palm strike towards Yi Zongxing. The palm arrived in front of Yi Zongxing and blocked his path. Junior, Zongxing is the vice principal of the Northern Ming Academy. I can't let you kill him today. Stop. This voice came from the Northern Ming Palace. Although it was extremely old, the voice contained an unquestionable tone. Every word was like a supreme order. Who are you? The moment Chu Fengmian heard this voice, he naturally understood that the owner of this voice was definitely a true ancestor. Compared to Yi Zongxing's realm, this was an ancestor who was countless times more terrifying. He was a super old antique hidden in the Northern Ming Academy. Who I am is not important. This old man only appeared to tell you that there's always someone stronger. Although you have some strength, it's better for you to stop as soon as possible lest you provoke a disaster. The ancient voice came again, as if he didn't expect Chu Fengmian to dare to question his words. His words contained some anger. Let him go. Chapter 8:18. Chu Fengmian, this is the founder of our Northern Ming Academy, the ancestor of the Yi clan, Yi Huang. Vice Principal Deng Ling had been standing beside Chu Fengmian the whole time. She had witnessed Chu Fengmian defeating Yi Zongxing with her own eyes, and it felt like a dream. Now, she hurriedly reacted and transmitted her voice to Chu Fengmian. You must not provoke this person. He's the true upper echelon of our Northern Mang Academy. The founder was the first-generation expert who established the Northern Mang Academy. His strength is unfathomable. Founder. Hearing this title, Chu Fengmian's eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of fear. In the Northern Mang Academy, it was a title that only a small number of ancestors knew. In the Northern Mang Academy, the true decision-makers were the founders. They had followed the Northern Mang sage back then, and each of them was an old antique who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Their strength was unfathomable. Although Chu Fengmian couldn't see the true strength of the Yi Huang, he knew that the Yi Huang's strength might have even reached the seventh step of the life and death steps. Chu Fengmian didn't expect that such an old antique would be forced out by Chu Fengmian. It seemed like Yi Zongxing's status was extremely high to be able to awaken such an old antique. Chu Fengmian, let him go. A faint voice could be heard all of a sudden. The moment he heard this voice, Chu Fengmian's face calmed down slightly. The owner of this voice was the Xianbei Saint. The surrounding space suddenly shattered, and the Xianbei Saint's figure suddenly walked out from the endless spatial turbulence. Xianbei. Seeing the appearance of the Xianbei Saint, many ancestors' eyes were filled with fear. Even some of the old antiques in the Northern Mang Palace woke up. Countless gazes looked over at the same time. Xianbei, why did you barge into the Northern Mang Palace? The founder of the Yi clan, Yi Huang, suddenly spoke coldly. Without orders, no one is allowed to barge into the Northern Mang Palace. You didn't come to the Northern Mang Palace because you wanted to watch my disciple die in your hands? The Xianbei Saint appeared and stood beside Chu Fengmian. He looked coldly at the Yi Huang and spoke. You people from the Yi clan have gone too far. Xianbei, are you trying to protect your disciple? Your disciple has injured an ancestor. This is an unforgivable crime. Chu Fengmian, kneel down obediently and await the Academy's punishment. Only then will we be able to give you a lighter punishment for your sins. The Night Monarch suddenly said to Chu Fengmian. All of a sudden, waves of pressure enveloped Chu Fengmian's body, causing him to feel an incomparably huge pressure. He was only a step away from being suppressed by him. His was a step away from being suppressed. A step his spiritual energy was a step away from being suppressed. Was just a step away from being suppressed by a swords. The Yes Dragon sword SE's sword. Unforgivable. It spoke. It and the S was. Dying is was. Dying right dying spoke of. Is. It as it as. It. Chu Fengmian looked at the Yi Emperor and laughed. You're the one who's begging me. If you don't beg me, you'll have to wait to collect Yi Zongxing's corpse. Chu Fengmian spoke coldly. The killing intent in his words was self-evident. Even in front of the Yi Emperor, Chu Fengmian didn't feel any fear. Instead, he threatened him coldly. This time, they heard Chu Fengmian's words. None of the countless ancestors present dared to belittle Chu Fengmian's words. Chu Fengmian's character was crazy to the extreme. He was a man of his word. Although it was a threat, he was a man of his word. Many ancestors looked at Chu Fengmian as if he was a fiend. They didn't dare to provoke Chu Fengmian anymore. Right now, Chu Fengmian dared to directly threaten the founder of the Beimang Academy. This kind of character was simply lawless. Junior, you're courting death. The Yi Emperor shouted angrily when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. He was the founder of the Beimang Academy. Even these ancestors were juniors in front of him and had to be respectful. Every word he said was a supreme order, an order that absolutely could not be disobeyed. But now, Chu Fengmian, who was just a disciple, dared to threaten him. How could he tolerate this? Suddenly, an incomparably huge palm print fell from the sky and blasted towards Chu Fengmian. The palm of this incomparably huge palm print was extremely dark. Once it shrouded over, there was no way to escape. Break! Chu Fengmian didn't make a move. Xianbei Saint, who was beside him, immediately made his move. He waved his hand and a wave of spiritual energy blasted out. When it collided with the palm print, the power of the palm print was instantly shattered. The two of them exchanged blows and their strength was actually on par. Tianming. Xianbei, you've already stepped into the heavenly fate realm? As the two moves clashed, the Yi Emperor's shocked voice came from the depths of the Beiming Palace. That's right, Yi Emperor. Today, your group of ancestors came to deal with my disciple, but my disciple easily dealt with it. How about this? Saint Xianbei said calmly. His words caused the progenitors to fall silent. Heavenly fate realm. Even Chu Fengmian didn't expect that his master, Saint Xianbei, had already stepped into the seventh step of the life and death steps, the heavenly fate realm. The last 3 steps of the life and death steps were the hardest to step into, but once one stepped into it, they would be at the end of the life and death steps. Such people were all old antiques that had lived for thousands of years. Now that Saint Xianbei had reached the heavenly fate realm, his strength was enough to be on par with the founder of the Yi clan, the Yi Emperor. Saint Xianbei's status had surpassed that of the old ancestors. He was someone who was on equal footing with the founders. Hence, none of the old ancestors dared to make a sound. Xianbei, are you really going to stubbornly save your disciple? He has violated the sex rules and is unforgivable. The Yi Emperor was silent for a moment and said unwillingly. If you're really stubborn, then this old man will awaken the founders. At that time, even you will be suppressed. Chapter 8:19. The Beimang Academy had been around for thousands of years. Yi Huang was definitely not the only founder. However, founders like him usually chose to sleep and rarely appeared in the academy. Yi Huang had only woken up because of Yi Zongxing's call. Any force that wanted to develop had its own foundation. The founders of the Beimang Academy were naturally their foundation. The Xianbei Saint's current strength was indeed very powerful. The heavenly mandate realm. Even Yi Huang was not confident that he could suppress Chu Fengmian in front of the Xianbei Saint. However, if all the founders of the Beimang Academy were to wake up, Chu Fengmian would not be the only one who would be suppressed. Even the Xianbei Saint would be suppressed. Try me if you dare. The Xianbei Saint said disdainfully when he heard Yi Huang's words. Yi Huang's tone made Yi Huang so angry that he almost went crazy. He had threatened the Xianbei Saint because he did not want to have a real confrontation with the Xianbei Saint. After all, the founders would have to pay a huge price if they were to be disturbed. Generally speaking, the founders would only choose to wake up when the Beimang Academy was in a life and death situation. It was not worth it to pay such a huge price to deal with Chu Fengmian, the Xianbei Saint, and the people of the Beimang Academy. Yi Huang's threat was only to scare the Xianbei Saint. He wanted the Xianbei Saint to take the initiative to retreat. As long as the Xianbei Saint did not interfere, Chu Fengmian was nothing to them. It would be easy to deal with him. But now, his threat had no effect at all. Yi Huang, even if you kill me today, I can also kill all the Yi family patriarchs present. When that time comes, we'll see if the Yi family still has a foothold in the Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian's tone was so eerie that it made people shudder. The Yi family patriarchs, in particular, felt their hair stand on end when they heard Chu Fengmian's words. They did not dare to question Chu Fengmian's words. Chu Fengmian had always been a man of his word, especially now that even Yi Zongxing had been defeated by him. Most of the Yi family patriarchs weren't even as strong as Yi Zongxing. If Chu Fengmian really went all out, it was very likely that he would be able to kill more than half of the Yi family patriarchs. At that time, even if the Yi clan won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. It would be unavoidable for them to fall in the future. Chu Fengmian, don't talk nonsense. The reason why the old ancestor didn't kill you was just to give you a chance to turn over a new leaf. You still don't know what's good for you. Quickly kneel down and admit your mistake. That's your only way out. When Yi Zongxing heard Chu Fengmian's words, he said unhappily. His defeat by Chu Fengmian had already caused him to lose all face. Now that Chu Fengmian had spoken, he was actually using their Yi clan's ancestor as a threat. How could he possibly tolerate this? A piece of trash like you dares to speak? Chu Fengmian coldly snorted. Suddenly, his figure moved. His figure was like an illusion. Suddenly, the entire Beimang palace was filled with Chu Fengmian's illusion. Many of the patriarchs couldn't tell which one was the real Chu Fengmian. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Zongxing. Suddenly, his palm reached out and grabbed Yi Zongxing's head in Chu Fengmian's hand. As long as Chu Fengmian used a little more strength, Yi Zongxing would really die in Chu Fengmian's hands. His death couldn't be more miserable. Chu Fengmian, what are you doing? In that instant, Yi Huang couldn't even tell which illusion was the real Chu Fengmian. The phantom movement technique was illusory and could be considered as the #1 movement technique in the entire 9 regions. Now, Chu Fengmian had already cultivated the phantom movement technique to the great completion stage. Even Yi Huang couldn't see Chu Fengmian's figure clearly in that instant. By the time he reacted, Yi Zongxing's head was already in Chu Fengmian's hand. Even if he took action now, it would be too late. No matter how fast he was, he wouldn't be faster than Chu Fengmian. Originally, Yi Huang thought that Chu Fengmian's threat was somewhat laughable. But now, his face was completely frozen. He couldn't laugh anymore. The fact that Chu Fengmian had displayed such a movement technique meant that there was absolutely no falsehood in his words. As long as Chu Fengmian was willing, he could slaughter most of the Yi clan ancestors present. He could even slaughter all the Yi clan's disciples outside the Beimang Academy. Even if Yi Huang could take action and kill Chu Fengmian in the end, the Yi clan would be completely destroyed. Even if they killed Chu Fengmian, it would be useless. This point happened to hit Yi Huang's weak spot. The Yi clan was going against Chu Fengmian to avenge Yi Tianjun. But now, if they killed Chu Fengmian, they would have to pay with the lives of more than half of the Yi clan's disciples. Even Yi Huang wouldn't dare to take it. Chu Fengmian, let go of Zongxing. Zongxing is the vice principal of the Beimang Academy. How dare you grab his head? This is a capital offense. Do you know that? Another Yi clan's ancestor said loudly. Shut up. If you continue talking nonsense, I'll kill you next. Chu Fengmian said coldly when he heard the Yi clan's ancestor. His words were filled with a murderous aura, causing the countless ancestral patriarchs to tremble in fear. This was too crazy. This kind of action. The Yi clan had been in the Beimang Academy for 10,000 years. In these 10,000 years, no one had ever dared to provoke the Yi clan. Even if an ordinary expert had the strength to destroy the majority of the Yi clan's disciples, no one would dare to do so. This was because if they did so, they would definitely be hunted down by the Yi clan. Every expert who could reach this step cherished their lives very much. No one would do such a risky thing. But Chu Fengmian was different. Chu Fengmian had an extremely crazy character. In his previous life, he had already died once. He had already earned his life in this life. Moreover, in his previous life, even if he was weak, he would never be threatened by others. He would rather die than submit. In this life, with such strength, he wouldn't compromise. Since the Yi clan wanted to kill him, he would fight to the death. Chu Fengmian stood in the air. The killing intent on his body was clearly displayed. Chu Fengmian held Yi Zongxing's head in his hand. As Chu Fengmian exerted more force, it seemed like the head would be crushed in the next moment. Chapter 820. Yi Huang, didn't you want to kill me? Now that I'm here, let's see how you're going to kill me. Chu Fengmian grabbed Yi Zongxing's head with one hand as he looked at Yi Huang and laughed loudly. Yi clan's ancestor? The founder of Beimang Academy? Such an identity meant nothing to Chu Fengmian. Even the 7 major sects were nothing in Chu Fengmian's eyes, not to mention Yi Huang. Damn it! Damn it! Yi Huang's expression had already reached the peak of fury and he was jumping with rage. Since when had he been mocked in such a manner? he had already unleashed all of his spiritual energy. He couldn't wait to attack Chu Fengmian. But he didn't dare to. Yi Zongxing was still in Chu Fengmian's hands, and Chu Fengmian was so confident. He didn't believe that Chu Fengmian didn't have any other trump cards. If he attacked now, it might mean the destruction of Yi clan. Kid, kill me if you can. I don't believe that you dare to kill me. If you kill me, you'll die too. Hurry up and let me go, or we'll both perish together. Yi Zongxing shouted crazily in Chu Fengmian's hands. He didn't believe that Chu Fengmian dared to kill him. If he killed him, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have any evidence against him. At that time, Yi Huang would definitely kill Chu Fengmian in anger. Don't dare to kill you? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with mockery. In the entire 9 regions, there was no one that Chu Fengmian didn't dare to kill. Suddenly, the battle dragon carriage under Chu Fengmian roared. With a thought from Chu Fengmian, waves of spiritual energy were injected into it. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian sat on the battle dragon carriage. The battle dragon treasure carriage suddenly began to gallop within the northern Mang Palace. Rumble! The entire Beimang Palace was shaken by this huge movement. Even the countless ancestors who were sleeping in the Beimang Palace were shaken. They were all awakened by this tremor. Is that so? Since you want to die, I'll grant you your wish. Chu Fengmian roared with laughter as he suddenly smacked Yi Zongxing's body to the ground. The battle dragon treasure carriage directly crushed Yi Zongxing's body. Bam, bam, bam. Yi Zongxing's body was crushed into a bloody mist by the battle dragon carriage's wheels. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and all the bloody mist was collected by Chu Fengmian. Only Yi Zongxing's head was left behind. Chu Fengmian picked it up and hung it on the carriage. Yi Zongxing's eyes were filled with disbelief. Yi Zongxing had never imagined that Chu Fengmian would actually dare to kill him. Many of the old masters were dumbfounded when they saw this. They could not believe what they were seeing. The old ancestors of the Yi clan were all enraged. They were furious to the extreme. Surges of murderous intent burst out from their bodies. Yi Zongxing was actually killed by Chu Fengmian. His body was crushed by the battle dragon treasure carriage. Even his head was hung on the battle dragon treasure carriage. This was an incomparably great humiliation. This humiliation was nailed into the hearts of the Yi clan's old masters. Yi Zongxing was the vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy. He represented the noble status of the Northern Mang Academy, but now he was killed by Chu Fengmian. The vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy had never been killed in thousands of years. This time, Chu Fengmian's actions had shaken the entire Northern Mang Palace. Madman! Madman! Vice Principal Deng Ling, who was standing beside Chu Fengmian, took a few steps back. Chu Fengmian was too crazy. Crazy and cruel. These words could not describe Chu Fengmian's actions. A vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy was killed by Chu Fengmian on the spot. Even if there were peerless geniuses in the Northern Mang Academy, no one would dare to do such a thing. Beating an old master and killing a vice principal. If any of these things were to spread to the 9 domains, it would be a big event that would shake the 9 domains. Most of the old masters present had already made the decision to not provoke Chu Fengmian anymore. This madman even dared to kill the vice principal of the Northern Mang Academy. What else wouldn't he dare to do? Fortunately, although Chu Fengmian was crazy, he didn't kill the innocent. Those he killed were his enemies. Therefore, as long as these old masters didn't provoke Chu Fengmian, they wouldn't cause any trouble. Right now, they were sitting on top of the mountain and watching the tigers fight. They weren't willing to make a move. Only the old masters of the Yi clan were furious. Chu Fengmian killing Yi Zongxing was a slap to the Yi clan's face. The Yi clan could be said to be able to cover the sky with one hand in the Northern Mang Academy. It was an extremely huge clan in the 9 domains. Since when had they been forced to such a step? They were even forced to such a step by a mere life and death realm martial artist. What's going on? What happened? The old antiques suddenly showed up one after another. The auras of these old masters were extremely ancient, with some traces of chaos. They seemed to have just woken up from a deep slumber in the depths of the northern Mang Palace. 3 founders. Chu Fengmian glanced over and felt that the auras of these 3 old masters weren't far from the Yi Huangs. They were all at the 7th step of the life and death steps, the heavenly fate realm. The status of these 3 people was obviously the same as the Yi Huang. They were all founders of the Northern Mang Academy. They had been in a deep slumber all this time, and were all awakened by Chu Fengmian's actions. As soon as they came out, they saw the scene of Yi Zongxing being crushed by the War Dragon carriage. Wind Emperor. Martial Emperor. Sun Emperor. Vice Principal Deng Ling hastily greeted the 3 founders when he saw them appear. What's going on? Yi Huang, you've also woken up? What happened that caused such a commotion in the Northern Mang Palace? One of the 3 founders, a warrior with an extremely tall body, suddenly spoke. His body contained an extremely frightening martial way. This martial way was more frightening than any martial way that Chu Fengmian had ever seen. This person was one of the founders of the Northern Mang Academy, known as the Martial Emperor. In the Northern Mang Academy, this person's martial Tao was the most profound. Wind Emperor, Martial Emperor, Sun Emperor, since the 3 of you have awakened, this brat deceived his master and killed the vice principal. He's simply a lawless devil. Since you've awakened, then come with me and kill this person. Chapter 821. When the Night Emperor saw that the 3 founders had awakened as well, he shouted out loudly. The Night Emperor hated Chu Fengmian to the core. He wanted nothing more than to kill Chu Fengmian right there and then to vent the hatred in his heart. Not only Yi Tianjun, but even Yi Zongxing had died in Chu Fengmian's hands. How could he bear it? Founding ancestors, please accept my offer. This kid is a ferocious devil. He killed the vice principal and attacked the founders. This is outrageous. I beseech the 3 patriarchs to kill this brat. The old ancestor of the Yi clan, Yi Mu, hurriedly shouted. Yi Mu, do you want to die? Chu Fengmian glanced at Yi Mu after hearing his words. He had spared Yi Mu's life, but Yi Mu still dared to go against him. Boom! Chu Fengmian's war dragon chariot suddenly started moving, rushing towards Patriarch Yi Mu in an instant. The war dragon chariot sped through the sky, turning into a beam of light and crashing into Yi Mu's ancestor. Stop! When the 3 founders saw that Chu Fengmian still dared to attack Yi Mu, their expressions changed abruptly, and they shouted one after another. The Martial Emperor suddenly attacked. A gigantic palm enveloped Chu Fengmian and the battle dragon treasure carriage. He wanted to subdue Chu Fengmian. Stop! No one can save the people that I, Chu Fengmian, want to kill. Supreme Sword Qi, break for me. Facing the attack of the Martial Emperor, Chu Fengmian's tone remained cold. All of a sudden, 400 streams of Sword Qi appeared around him and turned into a single stream of Sword Qi, which shot forward. The Martial Emperor's gigantic palm was directly cut open by the Supreme Sword Qi and shattered on the spot. What? The Martial King hadn't expected that the Supreme Sword Qi would actually contain such a sharp power. His palm was mercilessly sliced apart by the Supreme Sword Qi. Although this was only a palm formed by his spiritual energy, it still represented the power of the 7th step of the life and death steps, the heavenly fate realm. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that not only would he fail to capture Chu Fengmian, he would instead be defeated so easily by Chu Fengmian. Almost at the same time, Chu Fengmian's battle dragon treasure chariot charged towards Yi Mu. No one dared to stop the battle dragon treasure chariot. Junior, stop right now. The Wind Emperor and the Sun Emperor, the 2 founders, also shouted loudly. At the same time, he suddenly attacked. Another 2 waves of spiritual power shrouded Chu Fengmian at the same time. He still wanted to stop Chu Fengmian and completely suppress him. No one can stop me. All of you, break! Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. Suddenly, a drop of blood essence flew out from his fingertip and landed on the War Dragon treasure carriage. The aura of the 8 ancient war dragons on the war dragon treasure carriage started to rise crazily. Dragon roars resounded. 8 runes that represented the ancient war dragons appeared on the umbrella on the war dragon treasure carriage. Suddenly, it opened and turned into a rainbow-colored radiance. Within the radiance, there were dragon roars. The rainbow-colored radiance collided with the Wind Emperor and the Sun Emperor's forces in the air. The war dragon treasure carriage was a top-grade heaven-grade spiritual tool. Now that Chu Fengmian had integrated his blood essence into it, its power was even stronger than when it was in the 9 Demon City. The rainbow-colored radiance was the toughest defense between heaven and earth. The two forces bombarded the war dragon treasure chariot, but they were unable to break through the defense of the rainbow-colored radiance. Innate Luo umbrella. Such a treasure carriage. This is the 9 Demon City's heavenly demon treasure carriage? How did the heavenly demon treasure carriage fall into his hands? The Wind Emperor saw this scene and was secretly shocked. He suddenly realized that the treasure carriage that Chu Fengmian was sitting on was the treasure of the 9 Demon City, the War Dragon treasure carriage. The War Dragon treasure carriage's defense was known as the Absolute Barrier. It could never be broken in a battle between cultivators of the same level. Chu Fengmian's current strength was enough to reach the 4th and 5th steps of the life and death steps. With his strength, he could activate the umbrella on the War Dragon treasure carriage and turn it into a barrier made of rainbow-colored radiance. Even the 2 founders of the Heaven's Mandate realm couldn't break it in a short time. At the same time, the War Dragon treasure carriage had already set off, locking onto the Night Herder forefather's figure. The Night Herder forefather continuously retreated and even wanted to escape. However, his speed was as slow as a snail in front of the War Dragon treasure carriage. His body was instantly torn apart by the wheels. Rumble! The Night Herder forefather's body was torn apart. Even the bloody mist around his body was devoured by Chu Fengmian. Another head hung on the War Dragon treasure carriage. This was another Biming forefather, killed by Chu Fengmian just like that. In addition to Yi Zongxing, who also died under the War Dragon treasure carriage's wheels, 2 Yi forefathers had died in Chu Fengmian's hands in a short period of time. In the history of the Biming Academy, such a thing had never happened before. 2 forefathers were killed by a single student. Even in the war between the Western region and the Earth Demon sect, these forefathers wouldn't die so easily. The Yi clan had been the overlord of the Biming Academy for 10,000 years and had only nurtured a total of 20 forefathers. Now, 2 of them were killed by Chu Fengmian. Such a loss was something that the Yi clan had never experienced before. Who else dares to speak? Step out. Chu Fengmian's gaze swept across the crowd. Now, not even the Yi clan's patriarchs dared to speak. Chu Fengmian was able to kill the Night Herder forefather in front of the 4 founders. It wasn't that the founders didn't make a move. They did, but Chu Fengmian blocked their attacks. A life and death realm martial artist could even block the attack of a Heaven's Mandate founder. This was beyond their understanding. In the entire history of the 9 regions, such a thing had never happened before. Little bastard. Yi Huang looked at Chu Fengmian and was about to go crazy. He no longer had any scruples. Chu Fengmian continuously killed the Yi clan's forefathers in front of him. This was an insult to him. Let's attack together and suppress this kid. A puny disciple dares to go against the higher-ups of our academy and kill our forefathers. Even if he's a monstrous genius, we can't let him go. We must teach him a lesson. The Martial Emperor, the Wind Emperor, and the Sun Emperor all looked at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. Chapter 822. Now, Chu Fengmian had killed Yimu in front of the 3 founders. Even with their esteemed status, Chu Fengmian did not place them in his eyes in the slightest. This caused the 3 founders to burn with rage. They were extremely furious. If you want to suppress my disciple, you'll have to get through me first. Xianbei Saint said coldly. He suddenly moved and stood in front of Chu Fengmian, blocking his path. Xianbei Saint was surprised by Chu Fengmian's disciple. He had only met Chu Fengmian by chance in the remote victorious martial country and accepted him as a disciple. He didn't expect Chu Fengmian to have such a day, especially now that he could kill an old ancestor in the life and death realm. No matter what, he wouldn't let Chu Fengmian be suppressed like this. Moreover, today's matter was caused by the Yi clan. Xianbei, are you really going to protect this kid? You have reached the Heaven's Mandate realm and are qualified to join the ranks of our founders. You must know when to stop and when to stop. The martial emperor looked at Saint Xianbei. He was extremely domineering, and his tone contained an unquestionable command. No matter what happened today, your disciple has committed a sin by killing the ancestor. Even if there's a reason for it, he must be punished. You, Xianbei, are also a member of the North Sea Academy. You should know the Academy's rules. That's right, Xianbei. You must give us an explanation for today's matter. If you don't hand over your disciple today, don't blame us for awakening the other founders and holding an ancient trial. The Wind Emperor and the Sun Emperor also attacked at the same time. Every single one of his words contained a kind of coercion. Under the pressure of the three founders, none of the old ancestors dared to speak. Leave quickly. I'll deal with this. With your strength, if you want to leave, they won't be able to stop you with my help. Xianbei Saint secretly transmitted his voice to Chu Fengmian. If it was just Yi Huang alone, he would be able to protect Chu Fengmian. However, he had the help of Martial Emperor, Wind Emperor, and Yang Emperor. Even if he wanted to protect Chu Fengmian, he couldn't do anything. He could only secretly transmit his voice to Chu Fengmian to leave. Xianbei Saint's words warmed Chu Fengmian's heart. Although he and Xianbei Saint were master and disciple in name, they didn't have much contact. However, today, Xianbei Saint had indeed recognized Chu Fengmian as his disciple. For the sake of Chu Fengmian, he did not hesitate to become enemies with the four founders. Even with his status, this was still a great deal of pressure. It's all right, master. Leave today's matter to me. Chu Fengmian's eyes' words. And the four founders, twos today's is. It seems that you guys really want to fight to the death with me today. Good, it seems that I, Chu Fengmian, am too kind. Today, I'll let you four old guys see whether you can stop me or not. And you, Yi Huang. I'll let you see with your own eyes how I'll completely destroy your Yi family. Chu Fengmian said coldly. The aura on his body had already condensed to the extreme. Sharp sword intent was fully displayed from Chu Fengmian's body. When Chu Fengmian attacked just now, he had used the power of the Battle Dragon Art, Supreme Sword Qi, and the power of the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. Now, the moment his sword will was revealed, it represented Chu Fengmian's real terrifying power. Layers of sword will surrounded Chu Fengmian's body. Countless mysterious sword wills were hidden around Chu Fengmian's body. Some of the weaker patriarchs couldn't see through the hidden door. However, the experts among the patriarchs were shocked when they saw Chu Fengmian's transformation. Even some patriarchs who had transcended life and death couldn't see through the mystery of the sword intent. Not only could they not comprehend it, but they couldn't even see it. Chu Fengmian's sword intent had exceeded the imagination of countless patriarchs. Sword, come. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and the ancestral dragon paragon's sword suddenly appeared in his hand. The moment the sword was drawn, the entire northern Mang Palace exploded. Along with the sound of the explosion, a terrifying sword light that was at least 10,000 feet long suddenly shot out. The power of 400 Supreme Sword Qi was contained in this sword light. The space of the northern Mang Palace was about to be torn apart by this sword light. For a moment, the sky and earth were spinning. This sword light directly swept towards the patriarchs of the Yi family. It instantly slashed towards the direction of the patriarchs of the Yi family. More than 20 patriarchs of the Yi family in the northern Mang Palace were all enveloped by this sword light. Ah! Ah! The bodies of some of the weaker patriarchs of the Yi family were shattered the moment they came into contact with the sword light. They couldn't resist at all. All of the essence blood was devoured by the sword light and integrated into Chu Fengmian's body. In Chu Fengmian's body, the essence blood was refined by the Battle Dragon Art, The power of the battle dragon art was fully unleashed. All of the essence blood was turned into the purest energy of Chu Fengmian. As his sword light swept out, Chu Fengmian's aura rose steadily. None of the patriarchs of the Yi family who were swept into the sword light could escape. This was Chu Fengmian's full strength now. He had obtained countless fortuitous encounters in the sinkhole sky. This was the first time he had used his full strength after mastering the Nine Realms sword art. His current strength was many times more terrifying than when he had been in the sinkhole sky. The sword slashed out with unstoppable force. No cultivator dared to resist such a terrifying sword. Damn it! Yi Huang didn't expect Chu Fengmian to suddenly go berserk and kill the patriarchs of the Yi family. By the time he reacted, 5 to 6 patriarchs of the Yi family had already died under Chu Fengmian's sword light. These patriarchs of the Yi family were enveloped by the sword light. None of them could escape. Not even a trace of flesh was left. All of them were crushed, leaving only the purest spiritual energy, which was all devoured by Chu Fengmian. Even though these patriarchs were beyond life and death and had extremely terrifying vitality, they were all annihilated in an instant. There was no doubt that they would die. Endless starry night. Darkness of heaven and earth. As the Night Emperor roared, he spat out a mouthful of essence blood. This mouthful of essence blood started to burn up in the air. In his fury, the Night Emperor was willing to pay any price to kill Chu Fengmian by consuming his own blood essence. Chapter 823. The moment the Night Emperor struck, he even burned his blood essence and punched out. The entire northern Mang Palace was plunged into darkness. Under these layers of darkness, no one could escape from the shroud of darkness. The layers of darkness turned into layers of cages, trapping Chu Fengmian's body within. At the same time, an unparalleled pressure descended. It wanted to completely suppress Chu Fengmian in the darkness. Once Chu Fengmian was suppressed in the darkness, there was no way he could escape. Eternal night darkness. Yi Huang's body had also merged into the darkness. Right now, he seemed to have become the master of this darkness. Chu Fengmian was just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in front of him. This is the supreme secret technique of the Yi family, eternal night darkness. Once it's activated, it's enough to devour everything around it. He will become the ruler of the darkness, and no one can escape from it. Xianbei Saint shouted from the side. He did not have time to attack. The 3 founders, Wu Huang, Yang Huang and Feng Huang, had already arrived in front of him, stopping him from attacking. Eternal night darkness? No one can escape from it. Is that so? Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a cold smile. He suddenly pulled out his sword. He was not afraid of the eternal night darkness. The tip of Chu Fengmian's sword moved, and a sword light suddenly slashed out. The moment the sword light was released, a gap was created in the layers of darkness around Chu Fengmian. Mysterious black sword formation. Out! The moment the gap was created, Chu Fengmian roared. 100,000 spiritual swords appeared from his body at the same time. The moment the 100,000 spiritual swords were unsheathed from the mysterious black sword formation, countless terrifying sword lights were displayed. The sword lights dispersed the surrounding darkness. At the same time, Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and Yi Huang's body was pulled out from the darkness. Yi Huang, you want to deal with me with such a weak technique? Ridiculous. Mysterious black sword formation, trap him. With a thought from Chu Fengmian, the black mysterious sword array surrounded the Night Emperor. Immediately, the Night Emperor was trapped within the black mysterious sword array. 100,000 spiritual swords formed layers of seals. Even the Night Emperor was unable to break free. With the ancestral dragon supreme sword in his hand, the Yi clan's old ancestors didn't manage to escape in time. They were all sucked into the sword and their bodies were shattered. Their essence and blood fell into Chu Fengmian's body and were devoured by him. Bang! 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 In the blink of an eye, more than 10 Yi family old ancestors were sucked into the sword light. Each of them struggled madly but to no avail. One by one, their bodies were torn apart and essence blood splattered everywhere. Good. Devour. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed when he saw the essence blood filling the sky. As long as he had enough spiritual energy, his battle dragon art would be able to increase his strength by another step. After leaving the returning ruined sky, Chu Fengmian didn't have many opportunities to kill experts. After all, it wasn't easy to kill someone who had surpassed the life and death realm in the 9 regions. Now that the Yi clan's old ancestors were gathered in Beimang Palace, it was the best opportunity for Chu Fengmian. Of course, Chu Fengmian wouldn't let it go. He wanted to kill the Yi clan's old ancestors and turn their essence blood into Chu Fengmian's own strength. Chu Fengmian opened his mouth and devoured the essence blood of the Yi clan's old ancestors. More than 20 Yi clan's old ancestors had died in Chu Fengmian's hands. The Yi clan is finished. Some of the old ancestors muttered to themselves when they saw this scene. The Yi clan's old ancestors were all killed by Chu Fengmian. Even if Chu Fengmian died today, the Yi clan would be completely finished. Moreover, who would have thought that the Yi clan's people wanted to deal with Chu Fengmian? Now, they were asking for trouble. Damn it. Damn it. What kind of sword formation is this? Why does this kid have so many treasures on him? The Night Emperor was trapped in the black mysterious sword formation and could only watch helplessly as Chu Fengmian massacred the patriarchs of the Yi clan. However, he was unable to extricate himself. Although the spiritual energy contained within each of the 100,000 spiritual swords of the black mysterious sword formation was nothing to the Night Emperor, the spiritual energy contained within each sword was nothing. However, every time Yi Huang wanted to break out, the power of the 100,000 spiritual swords would fuse together. These 100,000 spiritual swords were all Earth-grade spiritual weapons. The combined power wasn't any weaker than the Ancestral Dragon's Supreme Sword or the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. The Ancestral Dragon's Supreme Sword, the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot, and the mysterious Black Sword Formation. As long as these 3 treasures were taken out, countless experts in the 9 regions would fight for them. Even the experts from the 7 major sects would come to fight for them. Any genius who obtained one of these treasures would be able to look down on the 9 regions and become an expert of their generation. But now, these 3 treasures were all in Chu Fengmian's hands. This was simply shocking. The treasures of the founders were nothing in front of Chu Fengmian. The mysterious black sword formation had always been cultivated by Chu Fengmian and was rarely used. This didn't mean that the mysterious black sword formation was weak. On the contrary, the current power of the mysterious black sword formation was even more terrifying than the Ancestral Dragon's Supreme Sword and the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. This was because the power of the black mysterious sword array did not require Chu Fengmian to control it. Even if it was given to any warrior, they would have the ability to fight against the founders. Using it to entangle the opponents, Chu Fengmian could slaughter the Yi family patriarch wantonly. Slaughtering my people. Causing havoc in the North Sea Academy, little bastard. Don't think that you can escape unscathed today. You have killed countless Yi clan's old ancestors. My Yi clan has declined today, but you will stay here forever. The Yi Huang's face was burning with anger. If looks could kill, Chu Fengmian would have died 1,000 times over under the Yi Huang's gaze. Following the Yi Huang's roar, the spiritual energy in his body was condensed to the extreme. Suddenly, he blasted out with his palm. The layers of spiritual swords on the mysterious black sword formation were instantly dispersed. No matter how strong the mysterious black sword formation was, it could only trap an expert like the Yi Huang for a few breaths of time. At the same time, an incomparably huge palm had already enveloped Chu Fengmian. This palm was blood-red in color. North Sea Heavenly Palace. The Yi Huang roared as he attacked. The entire North Sea Heavenly Palace was like a living creature that had suddenly awakened. Waves of pressure suddenly fell from the sky and enveloped Chu Fengmian. Chapter 824. As the Night Emperor made his move, a terrifying pressure suddenly surged out from the northern Ming Palace. This sudden change caused even the countless old ancestors in the northern Ming Palace to be extremely shocked. It was as if no one had expected this. The northern Ming Palace had existed since the establishment of the Northern Ming Academy. It had always been the sacred ground of the Northern Ming Academy. However, few people knew that the Northern Ming Palace itself was an extremely frightening spiritual artifact. Only the founders had the qualifications to know about this matter and use the power of the Northern Ming Palace. This power. Feeling the change in the Northern Ming Palace, Chu Fengmian's gaze slightly changed. There was some astonishment and some nostalgia. This nostalgia flashed by in an instant. The Night Emperor only saw the astonishment in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Chu Fengmian, do you really think that my Northern Ming Academy doesn't have any foundation? No one has ever dared to cause trouble in the Northern Ming Palace. The Night Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian and spoke while controlling the power of the Northern Ming Palace with his mind. Being in the Northern Ming Palace, under the pressure of the Northern Ming Palace, even the founders had to bear a great pressure. If this pressure enveloped Chu Fengmian, he wouldn't even have the strength to retaliate. There's actually such a method hidden in the Northern Ming Palace. The Night Emperor didn't hesitate to use such a foundation. It seems like Chu Fengmian has forced him to the extreme. A life and death expert can actually force the Northern Ming Academy to such an extent. The surrounding ancestors sighed with emotion. Feeling the aura of the Northern Ming Palace, many of them already understood in their hearts. Chu Fengmian was bound to lose this battle. No. It should be said that in their hearts, they had never imagined that Chu Fengmian would be able to reach such a stage. Chu Fengmian had forced the Night Emperor to such an extent and killed countless ancestors of the Yi family. Everything he had done was already enough to shock the world. However, it was a pity that no matter how monstrous and heaven-defying Chu Fengmian was, no one felt that Chu Fengmian had any chance in this situation. Run! The Xianbei Saint hurriedly turned around and shouted at Chu Fengmian. In Northern Ming Palace, the pressure of Northern Ming Palace was almost invincible. Even powerful martial artists would find it extremely difficult to resist this pressure, let alone Chu Fengmian, who was only in life and death realm. How could he resist it? Chu Fengmian, your strength is indeed monstrous. You can't even find someone as monstrous as you in the entire 9 domains. Yi Huang looked at Chu Fengmian and said word by word. However, today is the day you die. Leave all your fortunate encounters behind. I will first suppress you, then slowly torture you. As his voice rang out, the Yi Huang suddenly moved. Within his palm, an extremely large seal was condensed, fusing together with the power of the Northern Ming Palace. At the same time, it enveloped Chu Fengmian. This incomparably huge pressure had already turned into a 7-story pagoda. Being locked down by this 7-story pagoda, no one could even escape from it. Under this move, even Heavenly Fate Realm martial artists would only end up being suppressed. Sword Sovereign Palace, I didn't expect you to still exist after 10,000 years. It seems like senior brothers still took you away back then. Facing this pressure, Chu Fengmian's expression was calm, but he suddenly muttered to himself. His voice was so soft that no one could hear it. However, in Northern Ming Palace, a thought seemed to have heard Chu Fengmian's voice. Rumble! Just at this instant, a golden spiritual sword suddenly flew out from the depths of the Northern Ming Palace. At the instant the golden spiritual sword flew out, the pressure that enveloped Chu Fengmian's body suddenly disappeared. The 7-story pagoda also instantly exploded. The entire Northern Ming Palace was completely engulfed by a wave of sharp sword intent. Northern Ming Palace's artifact spirit? Why would the artifact spirit of Northern Ming Palace suddenly appear? Yi Huang, Wind Emperor, Sun Emperor, and the others were all stunned when they saw the golden spiritual sword appear. Others might not know, but they clearly knew that the golden spiritual sword was the artifact spirit of Northern Ming Palace. All along, the artifact spirit of Northern Ming Palace had been hidden in the depths of Northern Ming Palace and had never appeared. But now, it actually appeared. Young Lord? It's you? The golden spiritual sword arrived before Chu Fengmian and suddenly stopped. In Chu Fengmian's mind, an extremely childish voice resounded. Yunjian, it's really you. When Chu Fengmian heard the childish voice, his face revealed some joy. He didn't expect to meet an old friend after 10,000 years. The Sword Sovereign Palace was the palace of the Master of Sword Dao. Back then, when Chu Fengmian comprehended sword techniques, he had an extremely good relationship with the artifact spirit. 10,000 years had passed, but the Sword Sovereign Palace had actually been preserved and wasn't discovered by the 7 major sections. It had always been hidden in Northern Mang Palace. What happened? Why would the artifact spirit of Northern Mang Palace appear? Furthermore, we seem to be unable to control the power of Northern Mang Palace. Not good. This kid has obtained the inheritance of Northern Mang Sage. It's very likely that the artifact spirit of Northern Mang Palace has noticed this. The Night Emperor, Yang Emperor, Wind Emperor, and Martial Emperor's faces instantly turned ugly. No, we must take advantage of this opportunity to kill this kid first, lest something unexpected happens. The Night Emperor let out a long roar and no longer hesitated. He no longer wanted to suppress Chu Fengmian and directly attack to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's body contained countless opportunities. Originally, they wanted to suppress Chu Fengmian and force him to tell them all about his various fortuitous encounters. But now, the unforeseen event made them unable to do so. The 4 founders attacked at almost the same time. Martial skills that filled the sky were all unleashed at the same time. A heavenly mandate realm martial artist was an extremely terrifying figure in the northern region. Now that the 4 of them attacked together, it was earth-shattering and simply impossible for anyone to resist. However, the moment the 4 of them enveloped Chu Fengmian's body, before Chu Fengmian could attack, a childish and furious voice suddenly rang out. You're courting death. All of a sudden, a terrifying sword aura shot out from the golden spiritual sword beside Chu Fengmian. The power of the entire Northern Mang Palace was mobilized and integrated into the sword aura. Suddenly, the sword swept out. Rumble! The sword ray swept across and exploded in the air. The countless martial skills and spiritual energy were all shattered by the sword ray. Layer by layer, everything was crushed. Chapter 825. The moment the golden spiritual sword was unleashed, his strength even surpassed the combined strength of the 4 founders. The sword swept across, looking down on everyone. No one could contend against it. Yi Huang, Yang Huang, Wind Huang, and Wu Huang were all forced back by the sword light. The rebounding force caused their chests to tremble violently as they spat out large mouthfuls of blood essence. The entire Beimang Palace was now filled with the sound of the sword. Even the old ancestors who were not affected felt the world spinning around them. Their faces were filled with extreme fear. Such power was enough to completely annihilate them if they were to be slightly affected. The Sword Sovereign Palace was the palace of the Sword Dao Master. The Sword Dao Master's sword intent had flowed into it over time. Moreover, Chu Fengmian, as well as countless of his senior brothers and senior sisters, had comprehended their sword techniques from the Sword Sovereign Palace. The Sword Sovereign Palace had seen the comprehension of this sword technique. Although he was an artifact spirit, he was also an expert of the Sword Dao. In the current world, there were very few Sword Dao experts who could contend against him. The moment he made his move, he displayed his powerful strength. Even Yi Huang and the rest had extremely shocked expressions on their faces. They had never imagined that the Northern Mang Palace, which they were familiar with, would actually possess such frightening strength. Moreover, the Beimang Palace had actually made a move to stop them from killing Chu Fengmian. That sword strike from before was only a little bit away from completely destroying them. After encountering such a calamity, they were already considered extremely lucky to be seriously injured. Cloud Sword. Chu Fengmian could not help calling out softly when he saw the Sword Sovereign Palace making a move. For him, this was the first time he saw the Sword Sovereign Palace making a move. 10,000 years ago, when the Sword Dao Master was besieged, Chu Fengmian was brought along by his 3rd senior sister to escape. he knew nothing about what happened to the Sword Sovereign Palace. Therefore, he did not remember that the Sword Sovereign Palace was brought to the Beimang Academy by his eldest senior brother. Young master. In Chu Fengmian's mind, the Sword Sovereign Palace's tender voice sounded again. However, this time, his voice sounded a little weak. My spiritual energy is not enough to kill these 4 people. No matter how powerful the Sword Emperor Palace was, it was only an artifact spirit. Just like Elder Yun and the Cloud Feather Palace, it had its limitations. Elder Yun could only move within the Cloud Feather Palace and was unable to leave. Although the Sword Emperor Palace was extremely powerful, it did not have enough spiritual energy to support the weapon spirit's movement. Don't worry, I'll give you some spirit stones to help you recover your spiritual energy, Chu Fengmian said after hearing the words of the Sword Sovereign Palace. He waved his hand and opened his spatial ring. Piles of spiritual stones flew out. They were all royal-grade spirit stones. They were as tall as a mountain and there were tens of millions of them. All of them flew out like a mountain. This is royal-grade spirit stone. Young master, where did you get so many royal-grade spirit stones? Even the Sword Sovereign Palace was startled when he saw Chu Fengmian's wealth. Even 10,000 years ago, accumulating such a frightening amount of wealth was an extremely difficult matter. He could also see through Chu Fengmian's realm, which was merely in the life and death realm. Therefore, Sword Emperor Palace didn't expect Chu Fengmian to possess such wealth. Good. Good. In this damned place, I can only absorb spiritual energy from the void. I only managed to accumulate a little bit after 10,000 years. Now that I have young master's spirit stones, I can recover 20 to 30% of my strength. After the Sword Sovereign Palace recovered from his shock, he was overjoyed. He began to mobilize his energy and devour all the spirit stones. Chu Fengmian was currently in the Beimang Palace, which was also the Sword Sovereign Palace. The spirit stones he threw out were instantly devoured. Immediately, the power of the Sword Sovereign Palace began to crazily rise. Compared to before, the power of the Sword Emperor Palace had started to change completely. The runes and engravings on the surface of the palace had started to appear, and a sharp sword intent had also burst out. When Chu Fengmian first entered, he did not feel that the Beimang Palace was the Sword Sovereign Palace. This was because the power of the Sword Sovereign Palace was too weak at that time. He could not feel the slightest bit of sword intent. Therefore, even Chu Fengmian did not recognize it immediately. He had to wait until the Night Emperor activated the power of the Sword Sovereign Palace before he recognized it. As the palace of the former Lord of Sword Dao, the power of the Sword Sovereign Palace was clearly far beyond this. Young master, this is great. 10,000 years, I never thought that I would be able to see you again after 10,000 years. While the Sword Sovereign Palace was devouring the spirit stones, his joyful voice resounded in Chu Fengmian's mind. For him, this was the first time in 10,000 years that he saw an old friend. The countless disciples of the former Lord of Sword Dao had all fallen. Not long after the establishment of the Beimang Academy, his eldest senior brother had also fallen. Now that the Sword Sovereign Palace had met Chu Fengmian, it was incomparably excited. At the same time, the golden spiritual sword flew towards Chu Fengmian and pierced into his chest. Chu Fengmian saw all this and did not stop it. The golden spiritual sword did not leave any injuries after piercing into Chu Fengmian's chest. Instead, it directly fused into Chu Fengmian's body. Master recognition. Ever since the Lord of Sword Dao died 10,000 years ago, the Sword Sovereign Palace no longer had a master. This time, it recognized a new master. Peng! 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 All of a sudden, Chu Fengmian's spiritual energy fluctuations were completely revealed. His body was constantly transforming, and the power of his body seemed to be crazily rising in an instant. Ninth layer of life and death realm. The recognition of the Sword Sovereign Palace made Chu Fengmian's realm breakthrough, directly stepping into the ninth layer of life and death realm. The Sword Emperor Palace was a spiritual weapon created by the Master of Sword Principle. Chu Fengmian and the Master of Sword Principle were of the same origin. It was self-evident that Chu Fengmian would benefit from the Sword Emperor Palace. Refreshing. Refreshing. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly. It had been a long time since Chu Fengmian had felt so refreshed. Encountering the Sword Sovereign Palace again was definitely the first time he felt so refreshed. What made Chu Fengmian even more delighted was that his realm had begun to rise along with the recognition of the Sword Sovereign Palace. There were some sword arts recorded in the Sword Sovereign Palace that Chu Fengmian had never seen before. Now, Chu Fengmian could integrate them into the 9 regions' sword arts, bringing him endless benefits. Chapter 826. This sudden change also calmed Chu Fengmian's mind a little. When Chu Fengmian wreaked havoc in the Beimang Palace, he was already prepared to fight to the death. With the Cloud Feather Palace as his trump card, Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid of anything. Therefore, when he killed the ancestors of the Yi clan, he planned to use the Cloud Feather Palace to escape unscathed and leave the Beimang Academy. When he was strong enough, he would return. However, Chu Fengmian never imagined that the Beimang Palace was the Sword Sovereign Palace. The Night Emperor planned to use the Beimang Palace to deal with Chu Fengmian and gave him such an opportunity. In this way, Chu Fengmian had to thank the Night Emperor. If it wasn't for the Night Emperor, Chu Fengmian might not have realized that the Beimang Palace was the Sword Sovereign Palace and missed such an opportunity. The situation was reversed in an instant. Chu Fengmian stood in the air with a relaxed expression. The Xianbei Saint, Vice Principal Deng Ling and the ancestors of the Beimang Academy were all in a daze. Their eyes flickered as if they were thinking, but they couldn't figure out what had happened. In comparison, the expressions of Yi Huang and the others were extremely gloomy and ugly. This was especially true for the Night Emperor. He was incomparably furious in his heart. If he had not suppressed Chu Fengmian and had instead chosen to directly kill him, there would be no need for him to use the power of the Northern Mang Palace. He would not have caused the Northern Mang Palace to actually stand on Chu Fengmian's side. Even when the 4 of them joined forces, they were still easily forced back by the sword light. The 4 founders were already severely injured by the sword. Each of them retreated continuously, their eyes filled with fear. They were afraid that the sword would appear again. At that time, the 4 of them wouldn't be so lucky. They might be killed. The Martial King, Wind King, and the others were speechless with fear in their eyes. As the founders of the Academy, they were Heaven's Mandate experts. Even if they couldn't do as they pleased in the 9 realms, they were still famous characters. They never thought that they would be so close to death. No one dared to make a move. What's going on? What happened to the Northern Mang Palace? Suddenly, a figure flew in from outside. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his early 30s. He was dressed in a long robe, and his clothes were extremely noble. He had a lofty aura, as if he had been in a high position for a long time. This middle-aged man was the dean of the Beimang Academy. Normally, he was elusive and mysterious. This was the first time Chu Fengmian had seen him since he arrived at the Beimang Academy. "Dean! Dean!" The patriarchs present bowed respectfully. The dean of the North Sea Academy had a higher status than the founders because his strength wasn't any weaker than the founders. In fact, at a glance, the headmaster of the Northern Sea Academy was even stronger than Yi Huang and the others. Northern Mang Palace actually recognized a master? What's going on? When the dean of the Northern Mang Academy arrived at the Northern Mang Palace, his mind moved. He used his spiritual sense to scan his surroundings and his face suddenly revealed an unknowing expression. The entire Northern Mang Palace had undergone earth-shattering changes. What shocked him the most was that the Northern Mang Palace had actually recognized a master. Since the death of the Northern Mang Saint, the Northern Mang Palace had always been located here. Even the Northern Mang Saint wasn't able to make the Northern Mang Palace recognize a master. In the following 10,000 years, countless experts of the Beimang Academy had also tried to make the Northern Mang Palace recognize a master, but to no avail. In the 10,000 years since the establishment of the Beimang Academy, the Northern Ming Palace had never recognized a master. Now that it had suddenly recognized a master, how could he not be surprised? Xianbei, what's going on? The dean of the Biming Academy looked at the Xianbei saint and suddenly asked. Although he rarely appeared in the Biming Academy, he was aware of the various things that happened in the academy. Now that the Northern Ming Palace had recognized Chu Fengmian as its master, the first thing he asked was the Xianbei saint. After all, Chu Fengmian was the disciple of the Xianbei saint. I don't know about this either. The Xianbei saint calmly replied. The Xianbei saint didn't know about the various mysteries surrounding Chu Fengmian, so there was no need for him to ask. Every honorable martial artist had their own fortuitous encounters and their own trump cards. Even though he was Chu Fengmian's master, he didn't need to ask about them one by one. The Northern Ming Palace has recognized a master. This is a big deal. Our Biming Academy has never seen such a thing in the past 10,000 years. Yi Huang's eyes flickered as he suddenly spoke to the dean of the Biming Academy. Dean, this person once received the inheritance of the Northern Ming Saint in the All Saints Hall. Perhaps at that time, he found out about the method to make the Northern Ming Palace recognize a master. This Chu Fengmian is truly too dangerous. He is also too arrogant and looks down on everyone. Such a person cannot be allowed to remain in our Northern Ming Academy. Why don't we capture this person now and force him to reveal the method to make Northern Ming Palace recognize a master? Yi Huang was still unwilling to accept this. Chu Fengmian had killed so many ancestors of the Yi clan in front of him. If he let Chu Fengmian escape unscathed today, he would regret it for the rest of his life. But now that Chu Fengmian had the protection of the Northern Ming Palace, he would only be digging his own grave if he attacked Chu Fengmian. Therefore, he could only place his hopes on the dean of the Biming Academy. The dean of the Biming Academy was an extremely mysterious person. His strength surpassed most of the founders. There were even rumors that he was the true #1 expert of the Biming Academy. Only he could deal with Chu Fengmian. Yi Huang, do you really want to die? Hearing Yi Huang's words, Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered and the killing intent in his eyes gathered to the extreme. He had to find a chance to kill Yi Huang. Otherwise, with the hatred that Yi Huang had for Chu Fengmian, there would be endless troubles in the future. But now, Chu Fengmian couldn't directly attack in front of the mysterious dean. Yi Huang, calm down. Chu Fengmian is still a disciple of our Biming Academy. Since the Northern Ming Palace has recognized him as a master, it's a good thing for our Biming Academy. The dean of the Biming Academy muttered to himself for a while and suddenly spoke. Chu Fengmian, do you know why the Northern Ming Palace has recognized you as its master? As long as you say it, this Northern Ming Palace will still be yours. At the very most, this secret will continue to be passed down. After all, this is a secret that our Northern Ming Academy has never known. If you say it, I guarantee you sufficient benefits. I can even make you the next principal of this Northern Ming Academy. Chapter 827. The next principal? The crowd was in an uproar. Those old ancestors never imagined that the principal wouldn't come to punish Chu Fengmian, but to promise him such benefits. The principal of the Northern Ming Academy had always been the #1 genius of the Northern Ming Academy. Moreover, it had to be a super expert that had reached the heavenly fate realm. There had never been such a promise made so early in the past. Could it be that the principal wants to rope him in? The same thought appeared in the minds of many old ancestors. Indeed, the strength that Chu Fengmian displayed was too terrifying. It wasn't impossible to turn an enemy into a friend, stabilize Chu Fengmian, and rope him in. After all, Chu Fengmian was the disciple of the Xianbei Saint, a disciple of the Northern Ming Academy. There was no need to fight to the death. Thinking of this, those old ancestors' gazes towards Chu Fengmian changed. Each of them was incomparably fiery as they began to think of ways to rope Chu Fengmian in. Previously, Chu Fengmian had killed Yi Tianjun and pierced through the sky. Those old ancestors couldn't wait to avoid Chu Fengmian. After all, anyone who came into contact with Chu Fengmian at that time would be going against the Yi clan. But if Chu Fengmian really became the next principal of the Northern Mang Academy, then they would have unparalleled benefits in the future if they were to rope Chu Fengmian in now. It seems that the principal has also noticed something. Chu Fengmian's expression was as calm as before when he heard the principal's words, but the corner of his mouth revealed a cold smile. The next principal? If Chu Fengmian were to say it now, he wouldn't be able to live until then. He would be killed by the principal. Ever since Chu Fengmian came to the Northern Mang Academy, he had first obtained the inheritance of the Northern Mang Sage from the All Saints Hall. Today, he had also recognized the Northern Mang Palace as its master. All of this meant that Chu Fengmian's identity might be inextricably linked to the Northern Mang Sage. The principal of the Northern Mang Academy definitely knew something about the past, but he didn't completely understand it. Therefore, he was trying to fish for information from Chu Fengmian. Once he knew the secret, the first person to die would be Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian didn't think that the principal of the Northern Mang Academy wouldn't want the countless fortuitous encounters and treasures on Chu Fengmian. I don't know, but when the Yi Huang wanted to kill me, the Northern Mang Palace automatically. Chu Fengmian's face replied. However, I can't use the Northern Mang Palace's power, but I can't use Mang Palace's power. It can't use its power, it can protect me. It can only protect me. Chu Fengmian said casually. From his expression, everyone understood that Chu Fengmian definitely knew something. It was just that Chu Fengmian didn't say it out loud. Dean, this brat is full of lies. Why don't we capture him and torture him? When the time comes, he will spill all his secrets. Yi Huang said viciously to Chu Fengmian. His threat was self-evident. Is that so? Come if you dare. I'm standing right here. Let's see how you can attack me. Chu Fengmian said disdainfully when he heard Yi Huang's words. He stood in the air, and the ancestral Dragon Supreme sword in his hand suddenly disappeared. He was totally defenseless, waiting for Yi Huang to attack. Yi Huang, Wu Huang, and the rest gritted their teeth in anger at Chu Fengmian's arrogance. But Chu Fengmian was standing there. None of them dared to attack Chu Fengmian. The terror of the sword glow from before was still imprinted in their hearts. The two of them did not wish to encounter such a terrifying sword glow a second time. Although they were arrogant, they didn't dare to attack Chu Fengmian. Xianbei, Chu Fengmian is your disciple. The dean of the Northern Mang Academy was silent for a while, as if he was thinking about it. After a long while, he spoke again. Your disciple won the first place on the list of top 100 talents in the Northern region and won glory for the Northern Mang Academy. The 9 regions genius battle is about to begin. I want your disciple to participate in it and win glory for the Northern Mang Academy. What do you think? Hearing the dean of the Northern Mang Academy, Xianbei Saint was silent for a while. He looked at Chu Fengmian and saw Chu Fengmian nodding his head. Yes, as a disciple of the Northern Mang Academy, this is what my disciple should do. Well, the 9 regions genius battle will begin in a month. Chu Fengmian, you will represent the Northern Mang Academy then. The dean of the Northern Mang Academy looked at Chu Fengmian and said. If there's nothing else, you can leave now. Yes. Chu Fengmian nodded his head and turned to leave. Countless ancestors left one after another. No one dared to stop Chu Fengmian. Just as Chu Fengmian was about to step out of the Northern Mang Palace, he suddenly stopped. By the way, the Northern Mang Palace will leave with me. Please leave as soon as possible. Chu Fengmian said calmly. Although this sentence was said casually, it set off a huge wave in the hearts of everyone present. What? The Northern Mang Palace will leave with this person. No. Emperor Yang said abruptly. The Northern Mang Palace has always been the sacred place of our Northern Mang Academy. How can it be taken away by a junior? That's right, kid. The dean is already being merciful by letting you leave. How can you take the Northern Mang Palace away? The Wind Emperor also spoke loudly. The Northern Mang Palace contained countless ancient primal chaos chi. The founders and the ancestors usually hid in the Northern Mang Palace to use the primal chaos chi to increase their strength. Comprehending the realms in the Northern Mang Palace was very fast. If Chu Fengmian took the Northern Mang Palace away, they would no longer have such an opportunity. Chu Fengmian, don't go overboard. The Northern Mang Palace is the sacred place of our Northern Mang Academy. No one can take it away. The Yi Huang also roared. All the ancestors and the 4 founders looked at the dean of the Northern Mang Academy. At this moment, only he could make the decision. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.